Hello and welcome guys. Make yourselves comfortable and enjoy. This is chapter 291. I recalled telling the senior I wanted some time to think about it, said Reynolds. The young man's expression changed slightly when he heard this, but he quickly hid it from Reynolds. He was about to speak when he noticed Reynolds was about to continue. But I'm done thinking about it now. I planned on heading to the capital and request to join. To think I was recommended by that senior. I'm very grateful for her goodwill, Reynolds added with a grin. The young man heaved a sigh when he heard this. The others weren't here yet, and according to their intel, Reynolds was a high-grade summoner, someone the likes of him couldn't deal with. You see how awesome Big Bro is. Even the Crown Prince has heard of me, Reynolds said with a big smile to Carl. Wow, Big Bro is so cool, Carl exclaimed with a look of worship on his face. He aspired to be like Reynolds, someone who was strong and powerful. Of course. Now let's go home and tell Mom the good news, Reynolds said to Carl. After Carl had turned around, he said to the young man, I'll need to drop him at home, then get some of my things, then we can leave together. Okay, but I'll have to follow you to your house. The young man replied, Sure, there's no problem with that. Reynolds shrugged before patting Carl in the head and heading to the city. Reynolds played with Carl along the way, laughing happily and telling Carl how awesome he was. He told him cool things about the Empire's forces as well as their duty. There were different units in the Empire's forces, and each unit is very important to the Empire. When the young man saw how enthusiastically Reynolds was speaking about the Empire's forces, he felt he truly wanted to join them. This made him less worried about him. When they were sent on this mission, he thought it would be a bit difficult, since Reynolds was a high-grade summoner, and the chances of him refusing weren't low. They soon got to the city and headed straight for Reynolds' house. It wasn't the most luxurious house in the city, just barely above average. When Reynolds returned, he suggested they move to a better house, but his parents refused, saying they were already attached to this one. They moved to this house a year after Reynolds was admitted into the Lunar Academy, and for people who originally didn't have much, it was perfect. The house was a story building with 3 rooms. The compound wasn't really much since there wasn't even up to 10 meters of space between it and the next house. You want to come in? Reynolds invited the young man when they got there. No, there's no need. I'll just wait out here. The young man rejected the offer. He wasn't comfortable with going in. After all, he and Reynolds weren't really friends. Okay, your loss. I'll be back shortly, Reynolds replied before taking an excited Carl inside. As soon as they got in, Carl's voice could be heard calling for their mother. 5 minutes later, the young man was still standing outside, waiting for Reynolds to come outside. Just as he was starting to grow impatient, creak. The door opened and Reynolds brought out his head. Please give me a little more time. It hasn't been long since I came home, so my parents are a little reluctant to let me go. Oh, I understand, but don't take long. The young man nodded in understanding. He also knew the feeling of leaving one's family. Reynolds thanked him before going back in. How considerate, muttered the young man, inside Reynolds' house. Come on Mom, you don't need that. Dad's already on the roof, Reynolds said in a low voice when he saw his mom carry her box of clothes. But fine, his mother replied. Reynolds' mother was a lady who was in her late 30s. But due to the harsh.ips she faced during her early life, she looked older than 40. She had long blue hair, just like that of Carl, and brown eyes. She had a small build with an oval-shaped face. They've already carried everything we need, Reynolds said before hurrying his mother upstairs. He had zero wishes of joining the Empire's forces or anything for now, but he knew if he refused when the young man asked him previously, then the young man would have attacked. He didn't have any problems with killing the young man, but he wasn't sure if he would be able to kill him instantly, and there was also the issue of protecting Carl. He also didn't know if the others that came along with the young man would be able to locate his house and use his family to threaten him, so he had to play it safe first. When he was still in the academy, he recalled Klaus telling him not to join the Empire's forces or the academy as an instructor. He could already guess there was something going on, and seeing the young man's reaction when he wanted to refuse confirmed his guess. The only thing that was baffling him was what connection he had with what was going on. After all, his family background wasn't the best, and there were tons of people who were at the third stage of the origin plane. There were also other high-grade summoners in the Empire, so it wasn't like he was the only one. I'll think about that later. First of all, I need to make sure my family is safe, Reynolds thought when he got to the roof. Are you sure about this, son? I don't think running away from the Crown Prince would be possible, Reynolds' father said. He was a normal citizen of the Empire, with a poor background and a little sense of inferiority towards those of higher statuses. Opposing the Crown Prince was not something he would dare to do. Trust me, Dad, will I ever do something that would put you all in danger? Reynolds asked with a reassuring smile before continuing. I may not know what they want, but I can tell it's not anything good for me. Okay, son, I'll believe you since you say so, his father replied. Great, now jump. Chapter 292. 10 minutes later, the young man was still standing outside the house when the others from his group appeared from the other side of the road and approached him. Heyman, where's he? The young man leading the group asked as soon as he got close to him. The group consisted of 7 people, 2 young men and 5 ladies. They were all in their mid-20s and in the origin plane. Of the 2 young men, one of them had a robust build, and the other was just like Heyman, who had an average build. The 5 ladies all had great shapes, with one's shape being more eye-catching, added with her incredible looks. It was hard to take eyes away from her. The young man who spoke earlier was the leader of the group. He was the one with a robust build, and the only one in the group who was in the 5th stage of the origin plane. The others were between the 2nd and 4th stages. Heyman, who was still waiting for Reynolds, turned to look at the group, before gesturing at the house with his head. He's in there, the eye-catching lady asked. Yes, he agreed to go with us. He wanted to bid farewell to his family before leaving, explained Heyman. It's been too long already, the leader said before spreading his spiritual sense out, wanting to check what Reynolds was still doing. Heyman wanted to speak, but he stopped himself. He originally wanted to do this, but most elementalists take it as an act of disrespect and intruding into their privacy, so he didn't try to check what was going on inside. The leader's expression suddenly changed, and he took a step forward. This drew the attention of the others. What's wrong? They all asked simultaneously. There's no one inside, the leader said with a sour face. What? Heyman exclaimed in shock. I thought you said he agreed to follow us back. What's the meaning of this? The leader questioned Heyman angrily. Yes, he even came out a few minutes ago to plead with me to be a little patient, Heyman said, trying to justify himself. Smart. He played you for a fool. He didn't have any thoughts of going back with us in the first place. I think he must have sensed that something was wrong, the leader speculated. HMPH. He won't be able to get away. Heyman snorted angrily, irritated by the fact that he was fooled by Reynolds. Johan, if you would please. The leader turned to the eye-catching young lady in the group. The young lady whose name's Johan nodded before stepping forward. There are 4 origin plane elementalists in this city. If he's added, then that's 5. I can't get the accurate location, but I can sense the general position of each one of them as long as they're in the city. After speaking, she closed her eyes and placed her index finger on her temple, trying to stay focused. The leader created a water barrier around them to keep any distractions away from Johan. 2 minutes later, he's still in the city. All 5 energy signals are in the city. There are 2 in the southeast of the city, 1 on the north end of the city, another one is close by, in the east, and the last one is in that direction, Johan said, pointing straight at Reynolds' house. The others looked at where she was pointing at and smiled. They felt that was definitely Reynolds, since it hadn't been long he left. They also felt he was planning to hide in a house close by, then come out as soon as he noticed the coast was clear. It's most likely that he's the one close by. After all, not everyone knows of Johan's special sensing ability, the leader said with a grin. Johan could sense all the energy signals in an area, and the distance she could cover was insane. Eternal City was at least 3 square kilometers in size, yet she was able to perfectly sense where the 5 energy signals were. With her, searching for Reynolds would be easy. The group headed towards the back of Reynolds' house, heading in a straight line. It didn't take them 3 minutes to get to where the energy signal was coming from. It was a huge compound that even had guards at the gate. On the gate was boldly written, Lark Family. The Lark family was one of the 3 big families in the city, aside from the Mez family. The head of the family is an origin plane elementalist, This was why they had such a huge property in the city. Reynolds's family could also be this powerful, even more powerful, given how young he was, but his parents refused. Damn it, this guy sure is slippery. He knew there was someone close to his house. Haman cursed out in annoyance. No need to worry, as long as he stays in the city, we will be able to track him down, the leader said before taking a glance at Johann, who already had her eyes closed. After she opened them, she nodded to him, signifying that he was still in the city. This time we will split up. Given how lavishly these old grunts live, we should be able to know if he's the one there or not, the leader ordered. Reynolds could be seen hugging his parents. This was the part of the city they stayed in while he was still young. The houses here were all old and worn out. He brought his parents here to hide. I'm going to be okay, Mom. No need to worry, Reynolds said, reassuring his mother. He didn't want to stay close to them. He didn't know if staying close would bring danger to them. If he left them here, he would attract the group towards him and leave the city. They were here for him, so he knew they would chase after him once they knew he was escaping from the city. He was oblivious to the fact that a group was currently heading in his direction, but he wanted to leave as soon as possible. Don't cry, little guy. Nothing will happen to Big Bro. Have you forgotten how awesome I am? Reynolds squatted to Carl's height while hugging him. Big Bro is the best, said Carl, who was on the verge of tears. You're right about that. Reynolds ruffled his hair before turning to his father. I'll be back soon. His father nodded before embracing Reynolds' mother, so she would let go of him. He felt fearful for what his son was currently facing, but he knew this wasn't the time to delay him. He might not have been strong enough to enter into the world of elementalists, but he knew a thing or two about it. Reynolds nodded before waving at them. With that, he turned around decisively, heading into the main parts of the city. It's been long I had to run away, but given their numbers, it's the only thing I can do, he thought while walking further into the city. Chapter 293. Reynolds didn't head deep into the city before he sensed 3 strong auras not too far from him. He didn't need to see them before he knew they were the people searching for him. He quickly made a run for it, spreading out a hint of his aura, so they would know he was there. The 3 people consisted of Haman and 2 other ladies. They sensed Reynolds' aura as soon as Reynolds sensed theirs. This way, Haman said to the 2 ladies, before chasing after Reynolds. There was a good distance between them, but just like Reynolds, he didn't need to see him before he knew he was the one. The girls followed behind Haman in chasing after Reynolds. They could also sense the aura, but they weren't really sure if it belonged to Reynolds. It didn't take them long before they exited the city. Given their speed, they could reach here sooner, but they didn't want to draw any unwanted attention in the city. When the group came out, they noticed Reynolds was heading to the south. This was the area he previously went to when he wanted to show Carl some of his skills. HMPH. He's pretty COC if he thinks he can take on the 3 of us, one of the ladies said. The other one shared the same opinion as well. Even Haman felt the same way. Even though Reynolds was a high-grade summoner, it didn't mean he could fight against all of them. Reynolds, who was currently running, had no wish to fight them for now. Had there been only 2 of them, he would have thought of taking them out quickly before the others came, but 3 wouldn't be easy to handle. The odds of the others coming before he killed all of them were high, and there's also the difficulty of the battle. While he was running, he suddenly sensed energy in the sky, and when he turned around to look at it, he realized it was a signal the others who were chasing after him sent to call the others. Only people in or above the origin plane could sense it. Crap, they're calling the others, he thought in a dejected manner. He was still calculating how far he needed to take these 3 before trying to deal with them, but now they've called the others. While running, he suddenly sensed 2 auras on the city wall that was on his left. Looking at it properly, he saw 2 people standing on top of the city wall. They were obviously attracted here by the energy wave. Luckily, they weren't part of the group chasing him. Rather, they were 2 of the 4 origin plane elementalists in the city. The 2 men standing on the city wall looked to be in their late 50s, but Reynolds knew they were well over 100 years. They had been in the origin plane for so long, and due to their poor elemental grades, it was almost impossible to get to the late stages of the origin plane, much less breaking through to the overlord plane. Both had shades of grey in their black and brown hairs. One of them was chubby, while the other had a slightly above average build with a long beard. Isn't that the young man who recently returned to the city? The chubby man asked while pointing at Reynolds. Yes, I noticed that some experts came to the city about an hour ago. To think they were this young, the other man said while stroking his beard. Seeing so many young people in the origin plane felt strange to them. The reason they refused to go to a bigger city was that they enjoyed the feeling of revel they got from the people here. The only chance of them going to a big city is if they managed to break through to the Overlord plane. But that's impossible for the current them. They were only in the 6th stage of the origin plane. But given the number of years they have left to live, there's a chance they might still have a fortuitous encounter. They're obviously here for the kid. 2 of them approached my compound a few minutes ago, but left right away, the chubby man said. The other man nodded before saying, we don't need to involve ourselves in this. We have no relationship with the boy. Okay, the chubby man replied before leaping back into the city. He originally intended to step in and ask what was wrong, but after listening to what the other man said, he gave up the idea. The only time they noticed Reynolds was after his test, but he joined the academy soon after, which didn't give them any room to speak with him. His parents had some sort of inferiority complex, so whenever they tried speaking to them, they rarely spoke much. This brought about an awkward relationship. Reynolds didn't feel anything towards them going back into the city so quickly. He spoke to them when he returned from the academy some weeks back, but they didn't really have any relationship. Although, he would have been grateful if they stepped forward to at least try to help or find out what was happening. The others will be coming soon, time to start separating them, he thought. Lightning covered his foot and his speed skyrocketed. Before long, he was out of Heyman's group view. No, he's going to get away. Heyman, go after him, one of the ladies said. They weren't as fast as Heyman, who was a wind elementalist, so it was only logical that he was the one who went after him. What if he attacks? Heyman asked, a little fearful of Reynolds. You don't need to fight against him, just stall him, the young lady said, looking at Heyman with demeaning eyes. She felt disgusted by his fear. They were also geniuses. Had they also gone into the trial land, then they would have been stronger than their current state. Okay, Heyman replied with gritted teeth. He couldn't refuse since he didn't have to fight against Reynolds. Even though he felt this was a trap, and he was wary of Reynolds' strength. He had the utmost confidence in his abilities. If he wasn't powerful, there's no way he would have been able to join this unit. Chapter 294. Reynolds ran into the forest accompanied by Heyman. He didn't have any qualms with killing any of these people if the chance presented itself. After dashing into the forest for a few minutes, Heyman looked around searching for Reynolds, who had disappeared into the forest. The thought of waiting for the others came to his mind, but thinking of the possible punishment he might face if he was the reason Reynolds escaped, he gritted his teeth and continued searching. Reynolds was currently sitting on top of a boulder deep inside the forest on an open field. Being a lightning elementalist, he was faster than Heyman. Although, not all lightning elementalists are faster than wind elementalists in the same stage. He could sense that there was only one person chasing after him, and this was exactly what he wanted. He waited leisurely while swinging his legs on the boulder until Heyman arrived. When Heyman got there, he looked at Reynolds with serious eyes. He could already guess his plan and knew his life was currently on the line, but he didn't plan to fight against him. I just need to stall him, that is enough. I'll escape as soon as he's overpowering me, then come back again. Heyman planned out his tactics. So, you're here? He asked when he saw Reynolds. Yup, I was waiting for you. To think you came foolishly. Reynolds nodded with a grin. I have no reason not to come, don't think of yourself so highly. Heyman said. He was comfortable with how things were currently going. If he could get Reynolds to continue speaking, then that would be great. Reynolds looked at him with a smile. He could almost tell what he was thinking. Unfortunately, he had other plans for him. Sire, it's a shame you'll have to die. Reynolds continued before jumping down from the boulder. This attributes to you, unfortunately. Heyman replied without showing any fear. Reynolds smiled. His elemental warrior was already in the surrounding area. He hid it somewhere Heyman couldn't notice it. Why are you people searching for me? Reynolds couldn't help but ask. He found this very strange. There was nothing he had that could attract the crown prince. You should come with us peacefully if you really want to know. Heyman replied. That should just about be enough. The others shouldn't be very far by now, he thought. Reynolds was a little disappointed that he didn't get a good reply from Heyman, but he didn't really expect him to tell him the answer. Without delaying any further, he attacked. Buzz. Boom. A lightning bolt struck where Heyman was standing. But he wasn't standing there anymore. He was a wind elementalist and speed was his forte. He appeared a few meters to the right, if you think you could. Boom. He was still speaking when another attack was sent towards him. This time, the blast range was larger than the previous time. But just like before, he dodged the attack effortlessly. This is going to be ease. Heyman, who just appeared, stopped thinking midway. He looked down only to see a lightning sword piercing through his chest. The sword accurately pierced through his heart. How? He asked with blood dripping from the side of his mouth and a look of disbelief. Behind you, Reynolds replied casually. The elemental warrior was standing behind Heyman, with his hand holding onto the lightning sword. After the first attack, Reynolds had a rough estimation of Heyman's speed. Getting the elemental warrior to sneak attack him became very easy. When he sent the other attack out, he waited for where Heyman would appear, and sent the elemental warrior there the moment he appeared, not giving any chances of dodging it. Thud. Heyman's lifeless body fell on the floor, with eyes still wide open. Although Reynolds gave him an answer, he couldn't turn around before he died. Reynolds waved his hand, and the elemental warrior vanished. 1 out, 7 to go. He made sure to check the corpse of Heyman before leaving, but there was nothing useful on him. 2 minutes after he left, the 2 young ladies who were with Heyman appeared at the scene of the fight. I always knew this fool shouldn't have been assigned to our unit. The young lady who felt disgusted by Heyman's fear of Reynolds said when she saw his corpse. Should we go after him? The other lady asked. They were in the 3rd and 4th stage of the origin plane respectively. She was in the 3rd stage, while the other young lady was in the 4th stage. Of course. The first young lady answered assertively. She was not scared even after seeing Heyman's corpse. She might not be that much stronger than him, but she felt it was his fear that caused his death. Why don't we wait for the other? Johan wouldn't have any problems with tracking him down. The other young lady advised. Don't tell me you're scared. We're 2, and you have me. Don't even bother about that guy. Even an elementalist in the 7th stage wouldn't be able to defeat us. The first young lady said confidently. Okay. The other young lady nodded. She was in the 3rd stage, just like Heyman, so it was natural for fear to develop in her heart after seeing his corpse. No one wanted to die. And going after an opponent like Reynolds who could kill them, and they can't kill, was more frustrating. They followed Reynolds' trail after coming to a decision. 5 minutes after they left, the other group appeared at the scene. The leader of the group looked at Heyman's corpse. He must have separated them after he noticed they signaled us. He was able to quickly guess what happened after seeing only 1 corpse. Heyman would have not been able to fight against a high-grade summon that was in the same stage as himself, much less one that was 2 stages ahead of him. The leader felt for them to fall for Reynolds' trap was very foolish of them. He had already guessed the other 2 young ladies wouldn't last long as well, since they followed after Reynolds. Johan, he called out. I know what to do. Chapter 295. Reynolds was currently resting in a cave, trying to recover as much elemental essence as possible. He didn't use much when he fought against Heyman, because the summon didn't stay out for long, but he would be relying heavily on it if he wanted to kill the ladies. Those 2 ladies shouldn't be far behind. I'll kill them before the others come. Question mark? He thought of a plan while waiting for his opponents. While waiting for them, he suddenly recalled his friends. If Gray, Alice, and Klaus were here, then he wouldn't need to run away. They could take on this group without any issues. Thinking of his friends, he searched his body and brought out the wooden object Gray gave to him. He ran his finger through it before keeping it. The thought of using it to call on his friends flashed through his head, but he quickly dismissed it. Since these people were searching for him, he was almost 100% certain that his friends weren't having an easy time as well. If only Gray was able to make those things, then I'd have been able to ask how they were doing. Reynolds waited for a few more minutes before the 2 young ladies got close. He stood up and walked out of the cave, stretching his body. He didn't summon the elemental warrior immediately, rather, he waited patiently till the young ladies appeared before him. Surround her now. The young lady in the 4th stage of the origin plane said when they saw Reynolds. Hair, with the likes of you? Reynolds asked mockingly. The young lady in the 4th stage's expression turned sour. She didn't think Reynolds would be so cocky. HMPH. We'll see about that. The young lady snorted coldly before attacking. She sent out a huge fire snake towards Reynolds. The other young lady attacked when she saw the first one attacking. She was an earth elementalist, so she made earth spikes sprout out of the ground where Reynolds was standing. Lightning danced around Reynolds' body before he disappeared from the spot he was standing on before both young ladies' attacks got to him. Boom. The fire snake struck the ground, causing an explosion and destroying the earth spikes. Boom, bam, bang. Reynolds continued dodging her attacks, vanishing and appearing in different locations. The quickness and accuracy of the young lady's attacks were terrifying. He genuinely felt some pressure from her. If not for his elemental warrior, then he didn't think he would have any chances of fighting her to a draw, much less defeating her. Boom. He dodged another attack, but this time, he noticed an earth cage surrounding him. Buzz. Bang. The lightning dancing around him exploded out, destroying the earth cage that was trying to hold him down. After destroying it, he summoned his elemental warrior. Bam! An attack that was coming from behind him was blocked by the elemental warrior. The fire elementalist's expression turned serious when she saw the lightning summon. This was the first time she was fighting against a summon, but she still felt confident in her abilities. Swish! The elemental warrior moved at lightning speed towards the earth elementalist, pointing its sword at her. The earth elementalist freaked out for a second, but she quickly got herself together before setting up a wall to block the advances of the elemental warrior. Bang! The elemental warrior slashed through the wall with a single stroke, but was met with an attack from the fire elementalist, who had been waiting for it. They continued exchanging attacks for a minute before both young ladies started having a difficult time defending against the onslaught of attacks from the elemental warrior. Its attacks were strong and relentless, giving the ladies a headache. The elemental warrior is a stage above the fire elementalist, and 2 stages above the other young lady. It has attack powers that could rival a 6th stage origin plane elementalist, so it was difficult for the ladies to keep up. What made things more difficult was its close-range attacks. "We can't keep on like this, attack him, he's defenseless now," the fire elementalist said to the other young lady when they managed to get a breather. Okay. The earth elementalist nodded. With a plan in mind, they immediately set it in motion. The fire elementalist would try to keep the elemental warrior busy, while the earth elementalist would deal a fatal strike to Reynolds. They couldn't kill him, but they weren't ordered not to beat him up. According to what was known about summoners, they are vulnerable once they summon their summons. Summoners mostly summon their elemental creatures when fighting against a single opponent, since multiple opponents could keep the creature busy, while the others deal with the summoner. Both young ladies were planning to use precisely this knowledge to deal with Reynolds, although it was a bit risky since it was difficult for both of them to defend against the elemental warrior, much less one of them. Reynolds watched as the elemental warrior easily overpowered the ladies, and a smirk appeared on his face. At this rate, he should be able to finish off both ladies within 3 minutes. Boom. The fight raged on, and most parts of the forest they were in had been destroyed by it. The fire elementalist gritted her teeth angrily. She had been trying to create an opportunity for her comrade to exploit on getting close to Reynolds, but the elemental warrior was more than a handful. They were both looking tattered, and their hairs were a mess. They weren't concerned about their current appearance though, keeping their life was more important than looks. 1 more minute went by, and the fire elementalist was finally able to create an opportunity for her comrade, at the cost of being stabbed on the shoulder by the elemental warrior with a lightning blade. "Go, now," she yelled while sending out a fireball that exploded out on the elemental warrior. Chapter 296. Reynolds watched as the earth elementalist approached him. There was no sign of fear on his face, rather, he even had a smile on it. The earth elementalist, who was already close to him, suddenly felt goosebumps when she saw him smiling, and doubt sprang up in her mind. But she quickly suppressed the doubt in her mind, and attacked Reynolds with her most powerful attack. Question mark? Huge boulders appeared mid-air from different positions, shooting straight for Reynolds, who was standing not too far from her. Her attack was so precise that it cut off all of Reynolds' escape routes. Only with an insanely precise and fast movement will he be able to escape. Since he currently has to keep his elemental warrior up, He shouldn't be able to use any elemental essence, since all of it is being channeled to the elemental warrior, thought the young lady. Her expression changed when she realized that Reynolds was no longer in his previous position. All she heard was the buzzing sound of lightning, before her vision slowly started to fade. How? She managed to ask with blood rushing out of her chest and mouth. But she closed her eyes soon after she asked this question. Since you're dead, I'll do you the honors and answer that. You see, high-grade summoners are not like normal summoners. We can perfectly fight, while our elemental warriors are fighting. The only reason we refrain from doing it is that the essence consumption almost doubles. I hope you can rest peacefully with this explanation. Reynolds replied with a chuckle before removing his hand that was covered in lightning and passing through the back of the young lady, appearing on the other side of her chest. His hand was covered in blood, but it didn't bother him. Reynolds's hand was the only thing keeping the young lady's body standing. When he removed his hand from her chest, she fell on the ground with a thud. He turned to look at the fire elementalist, who currently looked like she just saw a ghost. She saw everything clearly, from how Reynolds casually escaped from her comrade's attack to when he stabbed her with his hand, which was covered in lightning, almost like a blade. She also heard Reynolds's explanation, which brought her into a state of even more shock. But the records. She couldn't accept the fact that the hard-earned opportunity she created at the cost of herself was wasted. Not just that, but it would also be the cause of her death. Not always right. Next time, don't place all your hopes on it. It might just fail you, Reynolds advised. But his advice did nothing other than irritating the fire elementalist, who was bleeding from the gash on her shoulder. She felt he was mocking her since he was still going to kill her. She wanted to speak, but was unable to, since the elemental warrior started its relentless attacks once again. She could already foresee her death the second her comrade died, but she didn't want to accept it without fighting. She yelled powerfully before frantically attacking the elemental warrior, under Reynolds's emotionless gaze. Reynolds didn't try to fight alongside the elemental warrior again. He had already used more than half his elemental essence during the course of this battle. Now all he wanted was for the elemental warrior to end the battle as soon as possible, so he could run away from here to try to recover. He still had 5 more people to fight against, and his elemental warrior was his greatest reliance. If he didn't have sufficient elemental essence during the battle, then he would be in danger. The elemental warrior didn't fail him, and quickly made short work of the young lady within a minute. She surprisingly put on a strong performance against the elemental warrior alone, but after getting pierced by 3 lightning arrows, she couldn't stay up anymore. Reynolds checked the corpse of both young ladies, but just like Heyman, they had nothing on them. After he was done searching, he quickly left the area. This battle took about 4 to 6 minutes. The others should be very close by now. Judging from how he hadn't sensed any of them, he guessed they were all moving together. Crap. Why the hell are they chasing after me? It'll be nice if the other ones would tell me though, Reynolds thought while running through the forest. All he knew about this was that it had something to do with the Crown Prince. Other than that, he knew nothing else. But he had never had any contacts with the Crown Prince. So why was he searching for him, going as far as sending such a squad after him? 2 minutes after Reynolds left, the other 5 people appeared from the west. The leader and Johan had angry eyes when they saw the corpse of the 2 young ladies. Although they had predicted it, it was still painful to see, especially for the leader. Where did he go? The leader tried to ask in a calm voice, but every one of them could sense the chilling killing intent seeping out of his bones. Johan closed her eyes, and after a few seconds, she opened them and pointed in the direction Reynolds was running in. With her in the group, it is impossible for Reynolds to escape, much less separate them again. They were all wary of his strength now, and knew he could very much kill any of them in a one-on-one battle. So they didn't have any plans of splitting up to search for him, even though some of them were slowing the group down. The leader looked in the direction Johan pointed at before clenching his fists tightly. This had been the worst mission he had led in his life. Of the 7 people he brought with him, 3 were already dead. If they were still unable to get Reynolds in the end, it would be more frustrating. Let's go, he ordered, and they started the chase for Reynolds again. Chapter 297. How do they keep finding me? Reynolds, who was currently hiding in a hole in a tree, opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the north. It has been over 6 hours since he killed the 2 young ladies. He had tried to recover his elemental essence. But before he even properly started cultivating, he would sense the aura of the group. At first, he thought they only managed to locate him out of pure luck, but after it happened a second and third time, he knew it was not by luck. They had a way of searching for him. Question mark? The thought of waiting to question them passed through his head, but when he thought of the battle that would ensue right after, he decided against it. He could fight against 2, but 5 was too much for him to handle. He got out from the tree and started heading in another direction. At this rate, it'll be hard for me to recover. I can't set an ambush for them, since they can sense my location, he thought while walking. After a few moments, he decided it was time to leave the forest. There were still other places he could run to. There was no need to stay so close to the city anymore. A day later, Reynolds was currently sitting outside a cave in a canyon, a frustrated look on his face. He had been trying to get away from the group for over 1 day now, but he still hasn't been able to escape. Now he feels like there might be something on him that's attracting them, but after checking himself properly, there was nothing on him that could attract them. He had tried hiding his aura, but it was no use. Could it be that he succeeded but was caught? He suddenly thought of Gray. The only thing he knew that they could use in tracking him was the wooden object that Gray gave to him, which was on the premise that Gray had completed the other one he wanted to make. If Gray had successfully made and was caught by these people, then it was not surprising that they were able to always find him. But these people shouldn't be able to catch him, unless they send people in the Overlord plane. Different conjectures came to his mind, but he couldn't confirm anyone. He suddenly thought of confronting the group from a considerable distance, that he might still be able to escape if necessary. While Reynolds was waiting for the group to catch up to him, Gray was currently over 10 kilometers away with an angry expression. That bastard, he was here a few hours ago. Why is he moving so much? Gray cursed out in annoyance. Gray got to Eternal City the previous day after tracking the light here, but when he checked the wooden object again, he noticed that the location had changed. He came out of the city, and when looked at where his dot was, he realized it was in the forest at the side of the city, so he followed it into the forest. But before he could even head deep into the forest, he brought out the wooden object again, and noticed the light wasn't there anymore. He guessed the light belonged to Reynolds, since Alice was from a big family which was in a huge city that was on the same level as Lunar City. Eternal City might be big, but it's not on the level of Lunar City. He would occasionally bring out the disc to check Reynolds' position, and every time he brought it out, the position was always different. There was a time he decided to just leave it out while tracking him, but he kept it after Reynolds stopped moving for a while, and when he passed through a city. If people were to see that in his hands, they would definitely be curious about it. He wasn't bothered about them, but if he were to encounter strong people, then that would be a problem. Why do you think he's moving so much? Void, who was perched on Gray's shoulder like usual, asked. I have no idea, but I don't think it's anything good. Hopefully, he isn't in any trouble, said Gray. And if he is, asked Void, I'll help him. If he isn't, I'll beat him up for making me walk so much. Void chuckled when he heard Gray's reply. Although it sounded like Gray was angry, he could sense the urgency from him. They were currently standing at the exit of a small town. Ahead of them was a vast canyon. According to the light dot of Reynolds, he was currently in this canyon, or maybe just after it. They didn't know how big the canyon was, but from what the traders around said, it was huge. Gray immediately headed into the canyon. With the disc in his hand, he wouldn't have a problem with locating Reynolds. He increased his speed to its limit, hoping to catch up to him before he starts moving again. 2 hours later, a group of 5 could be seen walking on one of the many parts of the canyon. They were the group who were chasing after Reynolds. Johann, the leader, called out. Johann nodded before closing her eyes, trying to find out where Reynolds was located. Since they entered this place, she would occasionally check where Reynolds' position was every 10 minutes, to make sure he hadn't left the direction they were headed. Huh, she exclaimed softly. We might have a problem, she said with a serious look. What's it? The leader asked. I can sense another energy which is at the origin plane as well. They're almost in the same direction. I don't know which of them belongs to him, replied Johann. No need to worry too much about it. Let's head in the direction of the nearest one. It doesn't change anything if we find him first or later. the leader said. The others nodded and started hurrying in the direction of the nearest energy Johann sensed. On another part of the canyon, Gray was currently resting under a protruding rock, using it as shade. His closed eyes suddenly snapped open as he looked in the west. Chapter 298. You've sensed them? Void asked casually. Gray nodded without any change in his expression. Question mark? He had been running through this canyon for the past 2 hours. He could see that he wasn't too far from Reynolds. He only sat down to catch his breath and planned to continue his journey in a few minutes' time. As long as they're not here to cause any trouble for me, I have no problems with them, said Gray. He still had his cloak on, but his disguise was already gone. He couldn't be bothered with making a new one in a place where he was barely known, so he just let it be. After 3 minutes, the figures of the 5 people soon appeared in Gray's view. He stared at them in curiosity, but he didn't have much interest in them though. The group continued approaching him. Because of the cloak he had on, they couldn't tell if he was the one they were searching for or not. After getting within 150 meters of Gray, the group stopped. He's not the one, the leader of the group said. How can you tell? Johann asked the question that was on the minds of the others. He's on the stage as me, probably about to even break through to the 6th stage. That's not an individual we'd want to tangle with, the leader replied. After getting a direction, the group headed straight for it without any delay. This had been the longest Reynolds had stayed in a position, so they hoped he might be tired of running. Gray watched as they left curiously. They seem sensible. Such a shame. I thought we were going to fight some people, Void said sadly. I think it's better this way, although there wouldn't be too much of a problem. I'm not a fan of unnecessary fights. Gray chuckled before taking out the disc. Good, he's still in the same location. Looks like he finally stopped moving, he thought when he looked at the hologram above the disc. He stayed for a few more minutes before standing up and scratching his body. It was time to see Reynolds. He was a little excited at the thought of seeing Reynolds again. It has been well over a month since he saw any of his friends. The only thing that made him sad was that he couldn't make the communication device. But on the way here, he added a modification to the disc. It was a way to signal the others if the user was in danger, just like the original use of the wooden objects, when he collected them from Quinn. With the one he made though, it wasn't a one-time use like the previous one, rather, it could be used repeatedly unless the device was destroyed. Gray soon got to the path the group took. He looked at it interestingly, before looking at his disc again. Interesting. Reynolds was currently still sitting outside the same cave, waiting for the group. There were 3 paths ahead of him, 1 on the right and 2 on left. He was feeling a little nervous because the thought of Gray being caught scared him. He didn't want to believe it, but thinking of how they kept finding him and connecting it to the device Gray wanted to make made him feel like Gray was already captured. Hopefully I'm just overthinking, he tried consoling himself. Maybe they stole the device from him after he escaped. Yes, that's very plausible, he thought once again, while he was still in the middle of racking his brain about Gray being possibly captured. He sensed the group coming in his direction. I see you're tired of running, the leader said before their figures appeared from the path on the right. Who says I'm running? But I'm curious though, why are you people after me? Reynolds asked while standing up. Other than the 3 paths ahead of him, there was 1 behind him. Once he gets what he wants from these people, or if they attack him, he would flee immediately. A criminal always knows the crime they're being captured for, the leader said with a fake smile. Oh, but what if the criminal commits 6 crimes in the same day and escapes, but was later captured? Then there's no way he would know why he's being captured. Reynolds replied thoughtfully while putting on a mocking smile. Spending so much time with Klaus was bound to yield some results, although he might not be as quick-witted as Klaus. When it came to saying things that would offend his opponents, he was sure he was slowly catching up. The leader was lost for words when he heard Reynolds' reply. He couldn't refute it because it was correct, but not replying meant that he was wrong with his initial statement. Seeing Reynolds' mocking smile irritated him even more. Just when he was about to attack, he noticed Reynolds wanted to say something else. I didn't wait for you people to speak about criminals, Reynolds said before his expression turned serious. How do you keep finding me? I've been intrigued by this for some hours now. The leader looked at Reynolds before laughing out. You really want to know? Reynolds didn't respond. He already knew they weren't going to tell him. He took a step back, planning to escape. Since they didn't want to tell him what he wanted, then there was no use in staying behind. Just as he took a step back, a feeling of danger suddenly enveloped him. He didn't waste any time and quickly jumped forward. Boom! An attack came from behind him, striking the rock on the side. Luckily, he didn't retreat when he sensed the attack, or he might have been struck by it. After Reynolds stood up from where he landed, his expression changed before looking at the sky. An inscriber. Chapter 299. An inscriber. Reynolds looked at the blue symbol on the air in shock. He would never have thought there was an inscriber amongst the group chasing him. He knew just how rare inscribers were. The fact that Gray was the only inscriber he had seen shows how rare they are. Oh, you know about inscribers? Guess you're more knowledgeable than I thought. Since you know about us, then I believe you should be aware that your chances of escaping just went down by a whole notch. The leader of the group snickered when he saw Reynolds' expression. The only way Reynolds could escape now is if he were willing to risk being injured by an attack. Reynolds looked at them with a serious expression, and just when the thought of using his elemental warrior to block the attacks as he escaped came to his mind, he saw a black cat sitting leisurely on top of a rock. That's a cat he was all too familiar with. There was no other cat in the world that had such pitch black fur, and the glint of intelligence in its eyes was very evident. If Void's here, then that means he's also here. Heh, guess I don't need to escape anymore, he thought with a smile. From how Void was looking, he could tell Gray wasn't captured. But since Gray wasn't captured, how do they keep finding me? He asked himself. This question had been bugging him for some time now. He initially waited for them because he thought they might have caught Gray. But after speaking to them, he knew they did capture Gray. This meant that they were using another way. Who says I want to escape? The likes of you can't make me run away. Reynolds sneered. The group looked at him strangely. They clearly saw him trying to escape a few seconds ago. Yet now he was denying it so casually. TSK, so shameless. Surrender yourself now, Johann said while approaching him. Even if he surrenders himself, he's not going to escape the punishment of killing my compatriots. The leader ordered icily, attack. Crap. I thought they were only going to continue speaking until Gray showed up, Reynolds thought, but quickly summoned his elemental warrior to fight against the group of 5. Boom. The leader of the group attacked with his inscription. He was a water elementalist. His attack consisted of ice arrows shooting straight at Reynolds. You'll lose one of your hands as punishment for your evil deeds, the leader declared as he continued the attack. Reynolds focused on dodging, while his elemental warrior would occasionally block the attacks he couldn't dodge. He couldn't attack because of the numbers. If he sent the elemental warrior to attack any of them, then he would have to use his elemental essence as well, while blocking some of their attacks. Void watched as the battle raged on, with Reynolds moving from one spot to another, without even trying to attack. The group currently surrounded Reynolds as they sent out organized attacks. They had good chemistry among them, which made their teamwork amazing. Reynolds is just barely dodging their attacks. Hey, they're beating up your friend, Void said to Gray, who was still on his way here. Oh, those people from before? He asked while walking casually on the path. Yeah, how did you guess? Asked Void. Well, it's actually quite simple. From how Ray was moving, it was easy to guess he was either going after something or moving away from something. The time frame between each of his movements was too short for him to just be traveling. If he were traveling, he would have at least rested for the night, but he didn't. Then from how that group acted when they saw me, it was obvious that they were searching for someone, Gray explained. He only guessed that they were searching for Reynolds. When he noticed the direction the disc showed Reynolds was on was the same direction the group headed to. Should I help? Void asked. He was itching for a battle. Not now, wait till I come. Reynolds can't be defeated so easily by them, and knowing you, if he was truly being beaten up, you would have joined the battle by now, Gray chuckled. The only thing he found strange was that they were able to locate Reynolds in this huge canyon. If not for the disc he made, then he wouldn't have been able to find him. It must have something to do with energy signals, he thought. He had read about this in one of the books at the academy. Each plane gives off a different energy signal. Hiding one's aura doesn't help hide against this ability. There were few people who were recorded to have this ability in Lunar Academy, but Gray wasn't acquainted with them. Make sure they don't beat him too badly, Okay, Gray said to Void. Got it, Void replied before disappearing from where he was lying. The battle had been going on for 2 minutes now, and Reynolds had already been hit by a few attacks. Some parts of his clothes had been burned, and he was bruised on his shoulder after being hit by an earth attack. The only attack that hadn't hit him was the water element attack of the leader. Reynolds looked around, searching for Gray, but to his disappointment, he hadn't arrived yet. Damn it. Where's that damn cat? It shouldn't have a problem with beating at least 2 of them. He cursed when he couldn't find Void. While Reynolds was cursing at Void, the leader sent an ice spear at him after he just dodged an attack. The elemental warrior was blocking 2 attacks, so it wasn't free to help him. Fuck. Reynolds cursed, trying to mobilize his elemental essence to block the attack, since it was already too close to dodge. But just then, something strange happened. The ice spear started gradually disappearing from its tip down to the last part. This scene stunned the leader, as well as the others. They couldn't believe their eyes. Reynolds was the only one who heaved a sigh of relief. He knew this was the handwork of Void, and it came at a perfect time. Finally, he decided to help. He quickly scrambled to a better position, and even called off the elemental warrior. With Void helping to divert all the attacks, he didn't need to finish his elemental essence on the elemental warrior. He was already almost dry. What just happened? The leader asked in disbelief. I don't know. The others shook their heads in unison. Maybe he destroyed it with an attack again. He's almost out. The leader said after he saw Reynolds dismissing his elemental warrior. They all knew about the huge elemental essence needed to sustain the elemental warrior. So seeing him call it off meant that he was already almost out of elemental essence. But the leader's expression changed when his next attack disappeared, just like the last one. The attack of the others also disappeared when it got close to Reynolds. What's going on? Chapter 300. What's going on? A voice came from behind the stunned group. Question mark? On hearing the voice, Reynolds heaved a sigh of relief and fell on his butt, tired from the fight. They were still trying to comprehend what was happening to their attacks when Gray suddenly arrived. His voice brought them out of their shocked states. They turned around to look at the arriving Gray, who still had the cloak on. The cloak was covering the upper side of his face, leaving only his mouth visible to the group. The leader of the group, who was still rattled, quickly composed himself when he saw him. He remembered he was the one they saw some minutes back. It's none of your business, one of the young ladies in the group said coldly. Gray was just about to speak when he heard the leader scolding the young lady. Mind your manners, Belle. Although it's not appropriate to tell you this, we're a special unit in the Killen Empire's forces. We were sent by the Crown Prince to apprehend this young man, the leader explained. Had Gray come a few minutes ago while they were still beating Reynolds up, he wouldn't have told him this. But after the weird scene of their attacks vanishing into thin air, it wouldn't be nice to add another issue to it. He might be wary of Gray's strength, but that didn't mean he was afraid of him. Oh, the Crown Prince, Gray muttered while still approaching the group. If I may ask, what did he do? He stopped a couple of meters away from the group before asking with a smile. This is something that involves the Crown Prince. If you're sensible, you wouldn't ask any more questions and be on your way. The leader replied coldly. You see, I'm a very nosy and curious person. Whenever I see something, I really want to know what it is, especially something like this. Gray said with a shrug before taking a step forward. Boom. That's a warning. Take another step, and it will be your last. The leader declared, standing straight. Oh, an inscriber. Gray exclaimed softly before taking another step. You see, I'm more of an inscriber myself, he said before spreading out both arms. 2 red symbols lit up in the sky, and small fireballs shot out of the symbols, heading straight for the group. What? The leader was dumbstruck when he saw the symbols mid-air. Inscription has always been his unique weapon, yet even after training for years, he still isn't able to make more than 1 symbol. Seeing this stranger make 2 so casually caused a wave of jealousy to arouse in his heart. Boom, boom, boom. The group separated to dodge Gray's attack. Now that's what you call a warning shot. Also, stop staring as if you've seen a ghost. You didn't think you were the only inscriber, did you? Gray asked with a mocking smile while walking forward. HMPH, don't blame me for being ruthless. The leader snorted angrily before commanding, you 2, take care of him. We'll deal with this nosy guy. He didn't forget about Reynolds. They had already worn him out. It would be a shame if he escaped after their hard work. Two of the ladies turned to face Reynolds, who was still sitting on the ground, leaving Gray to the leader, Johan, and the last young man in the group. This isn't too good. I mean, I don't want people to say I bullied you. How about this? Call those two to attack me as well. Gray jeered at the group. Hey bud, are you ready now? He asked Void, who was currently back at his previous lying position on top of a rock. No, opening so many space tunnels at the same time to block their attacks is exhausting, Void replied tiredly. When he helped Reynolds previously, he thought he was going to block at most 2 attacks, but who would have known that the moment Reynolds realized he was helping, he would stop defending. This forced him to open multiple space tunnels to block the attacks. This was a very strenuous task for a space elementalist, and it requires a large amount of spiritual energy to maintain it. Had Gray not come at the time he did, then if the group attacked again, he wasn't sure he could block off all of them. Crap. How do you expect me to beat them? Gray couldn't help but ask. I'll need a few minutes to rest, Void replied blandly. Gray cursed inside, but maintained a straight face while staring at the group. With Void out, for now, he needed to draw the whole group to himself. He could tell Reynolds was even more tired, so it would be hard for him to defend himself. The leader of the group attacked straight away with the others. The 2 young ladies, who were both fire elementalists, attacked Reynolds at the same time as well. Sigh, it's been a while. I fought. Time to see how much I've improved. Gray sighed before casually stretching both hands forward. Boom. What followed was an intense energy wave with Gray at the center. The energy wave kicked up wind and dust in the area. Just as the group's attacks were about to close in on him, he vanished from his spot with a lightning shadow, taking his place for a fragment of a second before disappearing. Bam! A human figure was launched into the air, followed by an ear-piercing scream. Bang! The figure fell heavily on the ground in front of the group of 3 whose attacks just landed on the ground. Huh! The leader exclaimed in confusion. When the dust died down, he was shocked to see the body of one of the young ladies who was supposed to attack Reynolds. He looked in Reynolds' direction and saw the other young lady was impaled by a lightning sword which was on Gray's hand. Gray pulled out the sword, and the lightning around it died down. This was one of the few good elemental weapons he got from Eaton's cave. He stretched his body while the young lady's corpse fell to the ground with a thud. How did he move so fast? Johan asked in dread. It hadn't even been up to 30 seconds since they attacked, yet 2 people from their group were already dead. They even died before their attacks got to the target. What sort of terrifying monster had they encountered? Sigh, I've gotten rusty after so long. Gray shook his head in disappointment. The group looked at him in terror when they heard this comment. Show off, Reynolds said with a smile. Chapter 301. Gray stood in the same position, holding his sword casually. The attack he used against the 2 young ladies was very simple: explosive speed. My physical strength should be around the 5th or 6th stage now, he thought to himself while looking at the dumbfounded group of 3. Question mark? The group looked at him with dread, with a hint of fear appearing in their eyes. Gray's capabilities scared them. Having such speed meant that it was almost impossible for their attacks to hit him, since he could easily dodge it. Wait, he's also a lightning elementalist, the second young man in the group exclaimed. When Gray used inscriptions the first time, he attacked with the fire element, but his blade was coated with the lightning element. This explained his explosive speed, but to a certain extent. After all, he wasn't the only lightning elementalist in the world, but the group hadn't seen anyone that's as fast as him. Gray's speed is almost double the speed of a lightning elementalist in the same plane as himself, if not even over. The leader of the group, as well as Johan, only realized this fact after the young man pointed it out to them. This increased the feeling of dread in their hearts once again. Mister, we don't know why the Crown Prince wants this man, but we were sent by him to bring this young man with us. The leader immediately changed his approach back to the first way. Gray's show of strength petrified him. He wanted to get as far away from him as possible. He wasn't part of the group that would willingly chase after death, just because he didn't want to disappoint the Crown Prince. He had a family waiting for him at home, and would be getting married soon. It would be a shame to die for someone else's cause. Oh, that's a shame. I really want to know why. Gray replied with a shake of his head. He almost lost interest in them. He thought this was a group of die-hard loyal people that the Crown Prince, or whoever assigned them, picked. Who would have thought they were just like normal people, and would bend at the sight of seeing someone far more powerful? Mister, we were only given orders, we know nothing else. I know you have no relations with this young man here, so there's no need in getting involved with the Crown Prince's matter, the leader said once again. He was scared of Gray, but thinking that there isn't any relationship between Gray and Reynolds, he thought he might as well try to speak to him, so he could let them take Reynolds. There wasn't really any reason for someone to offend the Crown Prince over a stranger. Gray chuckled when he heard what the leader said before replying, but the Crown Prince wouldn't know if you don't tell him, right? I swear on my life, none of us will speak of you killing some of our party. I'll tell the. I don't think you get what I'm trying to say here. Gray cut short the leader who was already swearing with his life on the line. Huh? I mean, if none of you leave here, who would tell the Crown Prince of our encounter? Gray said while giving off a calm aura like he wasn't speaking about the lives of a group of people. No one. Exactly, Gray said pointing at Johann, who was the only one confident enough to answer his question. The leader of the group, as well as Johann's pupils, dilated, while fear could be visibly seen on the face of the other young man. Gray is probably the only origin plane elementalist in the world, who could make a group of 3 who he was only ahead of 2 with a single stage, and on the same stage as 1, feel like they were fighting against someone who is a whole plane ahead of them. The strength gap between them was horrifying. Mister, isn't this a little too excessive? We didn't offend you in any way, killing us just because of a stranger. Why? The leader asked, not willing to accept the fact that they might die here. Simple, he's my friend. Gray laughed before taking off the hood that was covering over half of his face, leaving the group stunned. Since Gray appeared, he had been shocking them, but this revelation seems to top it all. Seeing a seemingly flawless young face appear behind the hood shocked the group no less than when they saw him kill 2 of their comrades. They couldn't associate the beautiful-looking young man in front of them with the ruthless killer they envisioned. Gray was a complete contrast of what they imagined the man would be, and looking at him, it was easy to see he was slightly younger than Reynolds. Friend, that means you're the one the Emperor wants, the leader exclaimed in sheer disbelief. Most of the people in the Empire's forces knew of the Emperor's hunt for a certain young man, although they didn't know the details. They knew he was an inscriber, and had a powerful teacher behind him. When this group was given the order to bring Reynolds, they found out he was friends with that mysterious young man. And here I was, feeling honored that the Crown Prince was searching for me, Reynolds said jokingly, while walking closer to Gray. Hey, you're still an amateur. I'm wanted by the entire Empire. Do you think you can beat that? Gray replied with scorn. His facial expression threw Reynolds in a fit of laughter. I've missed you, bud, but on a more serious note, what did you do to the Emperor? I have no idea. I tried asking some of the new instructors at the academy, but none of them knew why they were sent to capture me. Gray replied with a thoughtful expression. The duo completely disregarded the group who were standing a few meters away from them, but the group was too shocked to even try escaping. What sort of man is his teacher to train such a monster? This was the question revolving around their heads. They also thought of the trial land since they've heard about it from their superiors, but they didn't want to believe it was the reason for his monstrous strength. He wasn't the only one who entered the place, so there's no way he would be the only one showing such insane levels of strength. While the group was still looking at Gray and Reynolds speaking, they got the scare of their lives. A pitch-black cat suddenly appeared out of thin air and laid on Gray's shoulder. How? The leader asked. He suddenly sensed a feeling of mystery clouding this young man before him. He was in the 5th stage of the origin plane. Even though he wasn't as strong as Gray, his strength was evident. He was focused on Gray and Reynolds, so if something came in at high speed, he would definitely sense it. But he didn't even sense any energy until Void appeared. Now, time to care of these guys, Gray said while releasing a massive killing intent. He didn't plan on allowing any of them to leave this place. Chapter 302. Reynolds took a few steps back when he realized Gray had gotten serious with the group. He was fine with watching from the sidelines. I don't need your help with these guys. I can deal with them on my own, Gray said to Void, which doused his already raging fighting intent. Question mark? Void instantly regretted not joining the fight the first time, but there was nothing he could do about it. At that time, he truly needed the rest, or he might hurt himself. Fine, he replied grumpily before disappearing from Gray's shoulder to Reynolds' shoulder. What type of cat is that? Johann asked her group while pointing at Void in sheer curiosity. The way he moved was intriguing. Neither she nor the rest of the group could fathom how he did it, which piqued their curiosity. But unfortunately, they had other things to worry about. I know that you're stronger than either of us here, but don't think you can kill us so easily, the leader said seriously. After finding out that Gray and Reynolds were friends, he had already given up the idea of begging, and he knew escaping wasn't going to be easy either. But since they already know of Gray's explosive speed, they will be able to defend against it. His only issue now was that for them to hit Gray was going to be difficult because of his speed. Heh, I know I won't be able to easily kill all of you, but I'm confident in killing you all at the end of the battle, Gray said confidently. HMPH, we'll see about that. The leader snorted coldly before attacking with his inscription. Ice arrows formed in the air and shot in Gray's direction. The arrows covered almost a 15 square meters range. The other young man, who was an earth elementalist, also made a move at the same time. He made 4 20 meters tall earth walls, which were each 3 meters thick, to block Gray's escape routes from the leader's attack. Johann, on the other hand, created multiple fireballs, waiting for where Gray might appear so she would attack him, in case he dodges the leader's attack. Just before the attack struck Gray, he smirked and raised his hand. A thin ice shield appeared on top of him, blocking any potential arrows that might get to him. Boom! The ice arrows continuously slammed into the ground. Since the leader didn't see Gray leave the place, he didn't stop his attacks. After almost a minute of continuous attacks, the leader finally stopped attacking. He nodded to the second young man to remove the walls, so they could see if their attacks did anything to Gray, since he didn't make any moves. Rumble. The earth walls made a rumbling sound as they sank into the ground. While Gray was inside the walls, his ice shield managed to hold off the attacks for about 20 seconds before breaking apart. But just as it broke apart, a blue light appeared around him, covering a 1.5 meter radius around him. Oh, it works perfectly, he thought with an embarrassed smile. Although he had already tested the capability of the blue vest before, he was still quite reluctant to use it. His cautious mindset made him feel as if it might not truly hold up. This was why he first made an ice shield before preparing himself. Had the vest not managed to block the attacks, he already had a second plan waiting in order to block the attacks. But luckily, it managed to stop them. He stood casually in the place while waiting for the attacks to die down. His inscriptions were still mid-air. After waiting for a few more seconds, the leader stopped attacking. He knew they would take down the walls to check if he was there, since he hid his aura from them. As soon as he saw the walls shaking while going down, he made a lightning bow. The arrow was a combination of both the fire and lightning elements. The body of the arrow was made of lightning, while the arrowhead was made of the fire element. He also prepared his inscriptions for his attacks. When the walls sank down to where his head appeared, the arrow which was notched was released. He also used the wind element to boost the speed of the attack. Gray used 3 different elements in a single attack. This was something unheard of in the Killen Empire. He had a smile on when his attack was released, but his face was soon covered by a surprised expression when he realized the leader of the group managed to sense him on time and made sufficient preparations. Boom! Gray's arrow was the first to connect with the ice shield the leader made in front of them. It exploded on impact, instantly spreading cracks around the ice shield. Crack! The ice shield was destroyed within a second. The leader nor Gray's inscription attacks had gotten to the opponents yet, before this arrow showed such destructive force. Johann was a little slow to react, but she attacked just after Gray's ice arrow hit the leader's shield. Boom, bam, bang. Gray and the leader's inscription attacks arrived at almost the same time, while Johann's fireball's attacks arrived a little later. The group was pushed back by Gray's attacks. The leader was the one who suffered the brunt of the attack, since he was closer to the ice shield. After the shield broke apart, they faced the onslaught of Gray's inscription attacks. The other young man managed to make an earth wall to block the attack, while also making an earth armor for himself. The earth wall was quickly destroyed by Gray's attack. While the group was panicking on how to block the attack, Gray was casually strolling forward in the midst of their attacks. This thing is a true treasure. I don't need to bother too much about being attacked, he thought with a smile. When he was making the device and comprehending the darkness element, He made time to give the vest as much elemental essence as possible. It took him almost 3 days before it stopped accepting any more essence. He tested out the defense again to find out just how much it could block. The result of his test was terrific. The vest had no problems with blocking his all-out attack, which was something that was almost the same as an 8-stage Origin Plane Elementalist's attack. The thing he didn't test out was if it could block his Chaos Orb. With the addition of his Darkness element, he was certain that the power of his Chaos Orb was well above the Origin Plane, but he didn't know if it could rival an Overlord Plane Elementalist's attacks. He hadn't fought or seen an Overlord Plane attacking before, so he couldn't gauge it. After moving out of the area of the attacks, Grey attacked the group once again. Both sides exchanged moves in an intense battle, but it was evident to all that Grey was gaining the upper hand as the battle progressed. Chapter 303. Boom. An explosion rang out in the canyon with a human figure flying out of the dust in the explosion. Question mark? Bang. The figure crashed into the wall by the side. The figure belonged to the leader of the group whom Grey was fighting against. Just as the leader struck the wall, Grey shot out of the area of the explosion, heading straight for the leader whose back was just hitting the wall. Damn it. How can such a young man have such battle experience? It's almost unbelievable. The leader cursed inside, but still reacted accordingly on seeing Grey coming towards him. He created an ice wall in front of him, before attacking Grey with his inscription, which was midair. Bam! Grey punched the ice wall with his BARE fist when he got close to it, which caused the wall to slowly start cracking. As soon as his fist hit the ice wall, lightning danced around his body as he disappeared from the spot. Bang! Multiple ice shards struck where Grey was previously standing, missing him by a few milliseconds. Grey appeared a few meters away from the ice wall, before looking at the leader of the group with a serious expression. This guy's a pest. His battle experience is amazing. Grey cursed and praised the leader at the same time. You do know you're only delaying the inevitable, right? Grey asked while looking at Johan and the other young man who was running towards where the leader was standing. He didn't do anything to stop them, since he knew he couldn't divert his attention from their leader. There had been times during the battle that he wanted to focus on this duo, but this gave the leader a chance to attack him sneakily. Luckily, he was wearing the blue vest. Your defensive tool will soon be out of energy. By then, we'll see who will have the last laugh. The leader replied with a sneer. He had taken notice of Grey's defensive tool. He didn't know what it was, but he knew Grey was wearing a defensive tool. All the times he had managed to get a clean strike on Grey, a faint blue light would always cover him, just when the strike was about to land. He had been watching it and noticed the light had slowly started diminishing. With a few more attacks, it would surely run out of energy. Grey showed an indifferent expression when he heard this, but deep down, he was a little shocked by the leader's observation ability. A smirk appeared on Grey's face before he gave a reply. You do know I'm not the only one here, right? When they heard Grey's question, they looked at the side and remembered Reynolds, and the mysterious black cat was still there. They didn't attach much importance to Void, but they were wary of Reynolds' elemental warrior. If it were to be added to Grey's overwhelming strength, then they have no hopes of winning this. The group's expression turned sour when they thought of it. At least previously, they still had a slim chance of escaping once Grey's defensive tool ran out of energy. But now, that hope has plunged down the drain. Grey burst out laughing when he saw their expressions. The easiest person to kill is someone who has given up any hopes of surviving. This is why he's playing the psychological game with them. If he is successful, then the group would put on less resistance against his attacks. Heh, looks like you also know your fates are sealed, he said with a smirk. The leader looked at his downcast party before taking a step forward of the entire group. He was the most experienced. This was why he was made the leader of the group. I know what you're trying to do, and to be honest, you were almost successful. But I know your friend still needs more time before he can summon his elemental warrior. This is why you're trying to delay us. Although you're stronger than each of us, you know you cannot kill us, the leader said confidently while staring straight at Grey. He noticed Grey's body language changed when he said this, which increased his confidence in his conjecture. Don't be afraid, he's almost at the end of his rope, the leader whispered to Johan and the other young man with sheer confidence. It was almost like he could already see Grey's downfall. Gray, on the other hand, was laughing inside. He purposely did the change in his body language to trick the leader. And from the looks of the confident smile on the leader's face, he could tell he was successful. I can't depend on the blue vest any longer. It's already almost out of energy. Damn it. How can it use so much energy for those few strikes? He cursed at the high consumption of the blue vest. Given how long it takes to fill it up, he expected it to last longer. But he couldn't say he was disappointed in it, since it has helped him greatly during this battle. With a renewed vigor, the group attacked him first. The leader used his inscription to keep him busy, while the young man, who was an earth elementalist, focused mainly on blocking the attacks of Gray. Johan and the leader attacked Gray simultaneously, making it hard to dodge. Had this group been fighting against someone else, then they would have been able to win. But against Gray, their chances of surviving are almost zero. Wow, Gray's gotten more powerful, Reynolds exclaimed when he saw them restart the battle. The battle was currently at its climax. Seeing Gray move from one place to another, easily dodging the group's attacks before attacking, he was awed by his show of strength. Chapter 304, Crash. The Earth Elementalist yelled in pain as he crashed hard into the wall by the side. Almost half of his body was crushed by the impact. He was currently bleeding from the side of his blonde hair, shaking from the pain. Owen. Johan and the leader yelled out at the same time, while looking at the pain-gripped Owen. You monster. I'll kill you. The leader yelled with his eyes almost bulging out as he stared at Gray. In the group, Owen was the one he was closest to. Seeing him in such a state sent him hysteria. Just as he was about to charge at Gray, who was looking at them from a distance, he was held back by Johan. Carlos, stop. This is what he wants. His defensive tool is already out. We just need to hang on a little more, and we can defeat him, Johan said while holding onto the enraged Carlos. Carlos looked at Gray before moving his gaze to the shaking Owen, who was moaning in pain. He clenched his fists while trying to calm his emotion. Even though the injury looks severe, as long as Owen doesn't die, he can recover. He nodded at Johan before taking a step in front of her. Johan understood his intent, and quickly went to feed Owen a healing tonic to stop the bleeding as soon as possible. Gray, on the other hand, stared at them without much emotion. He couldn't say he really felt anything for them. After all, they are enemies. But he didn't really like these senseless killings. Who is wrong and who is right? It doesn't matter. What truly matters is whose side you're on. ESK. Crazy people, he thought with a shake of his head while looking at them. His defensive tool was out of energy, and he had been stuck once. Luckily, he prepared an earth armor as well. The group thought it was the defensive tool when it blocked one of their strikes. This is a battle I'm bound to win, Gray declared as he started slowly approaching Carlos and Johan. Carlos looked at Johan, who was feeding Owen a healing tonic, before looking at Gray once again. He had tried accessing Gray's strength since the beginning of the battle, but he had been unable to find out his true strength or come up with a plan to deal with him. He not only has explosive speed, but his attacks are explosive as well. To think he could last this long. Normally, when an elementalist uses explosive speed or attacks, the consumption is insane. We've been fighting for almost 5 minutes now, and he still has 2 inscriptions up. Guess we'll have to go with a battle of attrition tactic. If we can defeat him, then we wouldn't need to worry about dying. Carlos's brain went into overdrive trying to come up with an escape plan. Don't attack him carelessly, focus on defending, he whispered to Johan. Johan nodded when she heard his order. Gray slowly picked up speed before lightning flashed across his body, and he disappeared from sight. Buzz. Swoosh. A bolt of lightning could be seen moving across the area of the battle scene, while releasing attacks simultaneously. Carlos and Johan focused on defending during this battle, while Carlos would occasionally attack with his inscription, whenever Gray presented an opportunity for him. But most of his strikes missed because Gray's speed was not something his attack speed could match. Another 3 minutes went by with the lightning bolt moving almost throughout the time. After not being able to get any strike at them, Gray was forced to stop. Damn it, taking down this guy is harder than I thought, Gray cursed while looking at Carlos and Johan. They were both breathing heavily, but so was Gray. Compared to them who had their backs against each other trying to defend against Gray's onslaught, Gray had been moving almost non-stop. Although he had been able to successfully hit them, the attacks didn't get to them with full power, because most of the power was used in destroying Carlos' attacks. Both sides went into a standoff once again, with Carlos focusing all their energy on defending. It was difficult for Gray to kill them. How can he have so much stamina? Carlos asked in between gasps. He initially thought that Gray would already be out, but even after almost 8 minutes of using such explosive attacks, he was still standing. Other than the sweat and his heavy breathing, he looked to be perfectly fine. It doesn't matter, it's almost ready. Johan, just a little more, and we'll be able to avenge everyone and kill this bastard. Carlos clenched his fists tightly. He's currently planning on taking a gamble. If he's successful, then they will defeat Gray. But if he fails, they die. Phew, I have to say, this guy's more experienced in fighting than most of the people I've faced. With the position they took up, they can perfectly block my attacks. And although my fire element attack is far more powerful, that guy always nullifies them. Gray thought while breathing out. One more time, if I can't, then I guess Void will have to join the battle. With his space element, they wouldn't know how they died. Lightning danced around Gray's body before he disappeared once again. This time, he wanted to end the battle with this round of attack. If he couldn't, then there's no harm in calling for Void's assistance. Get ready, he's coming. Carlos yelled, we'll end him with this move. Boom, bam. When Gray's fireball was about to hit them, Carlos set up an ice sphere that covered an area of almost 12 meters in radius. With a spread of his hand, 12 faint lights raced along with the sphere as it expanded from Carlos's position. Boom, bang, crack. The sphere managed to block 5 of the fireballs before cracks ran across it. Another hit and it exploded, sending bits of ice across the battlefield. Now, Gray, who was biding his time from another location, shot straight into the 12-meter range, with a lightning sword in hand. Just as he was about to attack, 12 lights flashed on the ground before rising into the sky. It formed a straight line up, almost 20 meters high, and shrunk to the area Gray was standing before trapping him. Gray looked at the translucent shield-like array trapping him. Oh, an array, how convenient. Crack. Chapter 305. Crack. The shield-like array started cracking under Gray's touch before finally, bang, it exploded within a few seconds. He destroyed it, just like that. Johan couldn't believe that the array Carlos had been making during the course of Gray's last attack would be destroyed with a mere touch. She turned around to speak, only to see a blade piercing through Carlos's head. His eyes were still wide open. He was dead. Gray withdrew the sword from Carlos's head, and his body fell to the ground. Carlos! Johan screamed with dilated pupils. Within a second, Gray moved from where he was standing 3 meters away and appeared behind them. I must say, although he was smart when coming up with your defensive plan, trying to secretly create an array in front of me was the most stupid thing he did in his life, Gray said emotionlessly. When he was fighting against them previously, at first, he found it weird how Carlos always attacked 12 specific spots. He would always wait for when he was in a particular spot before striking. After observing it a few more times, he realized he was actually trying to make an array, a killing array. If the array traps him, then he wouldn't be able to move in the small space. Neither will he be able to attack. But attacks from the outside could come in while also being bolstered by the array after they pass through it. After figuring out the array, he quickly started thinking of the quickest way to break it. He had personally never created this array before, but being good at arrays, he was able to quickly find the weak point in it, while Carlos was still in the process of making it. All he did when he tapped on it was using his darkness element to corrode the weak link, easily shattering it. The reason he let Carlos complete the array was so that he could get a chance to go close to them, since Carlos would be confident in his array trapping him. Johan looked at the body of Carlos, before switching her gaze to Erwin. Her eyes were currently filled with tears and hatred. All we were doing was following orders, she muttered under her breath. Gray heard what she said before shaking his head, and all I'm doing is trying to survive. Do you think the people who want me will keep me alive, given how desperately they're trying to find me? Now tell me, why are they searching for me? He asked while approaching Johan, who had stopped moving altogether. I don't know. Make it quick. I don't want to suffer, Johan said before closing her eyes with tears running down the side of her face. She knew Gray would kill her no matter what, so all she could do was at least beg him to make it quick. She tried committing suicide, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She didn't want to die. Gray nodded before raising his hand. After dropping it, Johann fell as well. A small hole could be seen on the middle of her forehead with blood flowing out of it. Gray also made sure to kill Erwin as well. He couldn't afford to allow himself to let them go. If they won the battle, then he would have been the one to die. But since he won, he will continue living. This is a cruel world, he muttered while approaching Reynolds and Void, who were waiting for him. Hey bud, I can see you've grown stronger, Reynolds said before hugging Gray. Gray, who was lost in thoughts, came back to himself when he felt Reynolds hugging him. The duo went into the cave where Reynolds was previously sitting before the group came to rest. Reynolds recounted how they came to his city, and how he was chased by them for the past day. What do you plan on doing now? Gray asked Reynolds after also telling him of how the new mayor tried hunting him down. I still have some things to attend to here. How about you? Where are you going? Reynolds replied before asking. I'll be going to meet up with Alice, and then Klaus, Gray said before bringing out one of the discs. Oh, here. He tossed it at Reynolds while also telling him how it works. I was unable to make the communication tool yet, but hopefully I'll be able to figure it out soon. It's okay. With this, we wouldn't have any problems with locating each other. What would be really convenient now is a spatial ring. If we could get one, then traveling would be great. Yeah. But unfortunately I haven't comprehended the space element yet. So you guys are stuck with the conventional method. The duo stayed the night in the cave before leaving and heading back to where they came from. Gray followed Reynolds to the town just before the canyon. After bidding farewell and telling him to take care, he left. Reynolds knew the city Alice came from, so he showed him where it was located on the map. After cursing him for not knowing where his friends came from, he almost punched him in the face when he told him he followed the light here, that he also didn't know his city. Gray followed the route Reynolds showed him on the map, heading to where Alice was. He also made sure to always look at the disc to make sure he was actually going in the right direction. 12 days later, after going through multiple cities, towns, and villages, he finally got to the city Alice was from. Standing in front of the huge gate, the word Frost City was written boldly on it. Merchants could be seen escorting carriages into the city, while soldiers who were guarding the city gates were sitting by the side, watching every individual that goes into the city. Time to see Alice. Gray took a step into the city, walking through the bustling city gate into the crowded street. Chapter 306. After entering the city, Gray headed straight for the first tavern he could find. He bought a horse after leaving the canyon, so he kept it in the tavern's stable. He recalled Alice was from one of the 3 big families in Frost City, the Rice family, so he might not even need the device to locate her. Gray didn't immediately head there. He knew it wouldn't be easy to see Alice, since he couldn't just swagger into the family compound. He planned to go over and check out the general situation of the family first. After all, since the Emperor went after Reynolds, the chances of him going after Alice were also very high. Void, you'll be sneaking into Alice's compound tomorrow. When you find her, give her this letter. He passed a letter over to Void. He also gave Void one of the devices to give to her. The content of the letter didn't say much. It only said Alice should come to meet him if she could. But if she couldn't, she should reply to the letter, so he'd know what to do. He stayed in the room for some time before going out to get food for them. After getting their food, he immediately started cultivating. He was already very close to breaking through to the 6th stage of the origin plane, after he comprehended and improved the elemental grade of the darkness element, so he hoped to increase his strength while he was in Frost City. The next day, he headed into the city accompanied by Void, who was hiding in his cloak rather than lying on his shoulder like always. Void being on his shoulder is something the Emperor's people would probably already be aware of, so he didn't want to take the risk. He walked through the busy streets of Frost City, heading for the Rice family compound. It took him almost 1 hour to get to the compound, which was located in the southern part of the city. Looking at the gates of the compound, it wasn't hard to figure it belonged to a big family. Gray estimated the compound was around 800 square meters, which he felt was quite small, given how big the spaces big families in other smaller cities take. An inn was across the compound, so he headed there for a drink. If anything happened in the city, especially to the Rice family, this was the best place to find out. With his cloak covering half of his face, he stepped into the inn. He walked to an empty seat by the window on the right side of the inn. From there he got a great view of the front gates of the family. I'm counting on you, Void, he said to Void after taking a seat. After getting the go-ahead, Void disappeared. Gray gave him the device so he could easily find Alice. He ordered a bottle of wine before looking across the inn, hoping to get something juicy from the conversations of the people who were sitting close to him. But unfortunately, even after almost 20 minutes, he didn't get any useful information from the people there. Most of them were speaking about their personal lives. "Hey, did you find her?" he asked. After a few seconds of waiting, Void replied, "No, the guards here are more than those at that mayor's compound." "Which mayor?" Gray asked, a little lost. "The one you stole that wine from, you know, who was betraying the Empire," answered Void. "Oh, that one. I totally forgot about him. But why would there be so many guards in the compound? Something must definitely be going. Well, I heard some guards speaking about the Emperor sending some people here some days back." Void told Gray all he heard from the conversing guards. According to the guards, Alice's father sent the people away, saying she wasn't in the compound. Being the head of such a big family, the Emperor's people didn't object much, rather they told him to send her to the capital when she returned. That explains the high number of guards. No, actually, just before the Emperor's people came, one of the Rias family members was almost assassinated, an elder to be precise. Well, there's that too. Did you use the device? Since it shows her light is here, it means she's obviously in the mansion. Or maybe she dropped the wooden object before leaving. Yeah, that too. Try to locate her quickly. You're a small black cat with the space element. Getting past so many people shouldn't be difficult for you. It's not. I only delayed because I saw something shiny. On hearing the reason, Void hadn't gotten to Alice yet. Gray almost spat out the drink that he just took a sip of. "Did you take it?" He asked a question which he knew would give him a very obvious answer. Since Void stopped because of something shiny, then of course he was going to take it. "No," Void replied hastily. His hasty reply only proved to Gray that he took it. "You're lying. Return it this instant." "We do not steal things from our friend's house," Gray reprimanded him immediately. "But it's her father's house, not hers," Void tried to justify himself. After a few seconds of scolding, Void finally agreed to return it. Gray didn't think he would return it though, but there was no harm in trying. Had he been there, then there might have been some hope in Void returning it. But with Void being alone, the chances are low. Gray waited for a few minutes before contacting Void again. To his surprise, Void said he was already at the place where Alice's light dot was on, but he couldn't find her. This probably meant that she left the wooden object in her room. She should know this is the only way for me to reach her, so even when leaving, she would take it, Gray thought while rubbing his head, a little distressed by the missing Alice. If he couldn't locate Alice within the next week, then he would take the risk of going to her family compound. He didn't plan on leaving this city until he was certain that Alice was safe. Void returned, and Gray went on to ask him about the situation in the house, and also if he returned what he took. Void told him all he heard while he was inside the house, and other than the information he got the first time, there wasn't really anything more. Chapter 307. 4 days went by with Gray going to the same inn across the Rice family compound every day. He would also send Void to sneak into the mansion, to see if he could find anything useful. But all their endeavors have always almost ended the same way. But Gray had been getting a general overview of the relationship between the three families in the city. The Rice family is currently clashing against one of the other two families, because of a newly discovered mine that was just between the boundaries of both families' property outside the city. The Rice family was the first to discover it, but they were unable to keep the Smith family from finding out about it. Neither family agreed to share the mine, since it was something that was very valuable, especially to the Smith family, which was a blacksmith family. The third family in Frost City has been keeping a neutral ground on the matter, just like the mayor's manor. They were both waiting to see the outcome of the struggle between the two families. Have you been able to see Alice's father during the times you have been going inside the mansion? Gray asked Void, who was about to sneak into the Rice family once again. No, he's never been in the mansion whenever I go, replied Void. That's strange. I've never seen him come out of the compound nor come back. Does this mean he went on a trip? Gray asked while rubbing his chin. No, the guards always say he leaves during the morning, said Void. Fine, guess I'll have to sneak into the compound later tonight. Gray quickly came to a decision. He usually comes to this inn almost as soon as it opens. The workers are already starting to look at him with suspicious gazes. But since no one has come to disturb him yet, he planned on leaving before that happens. If only I can find a spot to stay close, Gray thought while drinking the wine on his table. While he was speaking with Void, he suddenly sensed someone approaching him. Raising his head, he saw a young lady who seemed to be around his age or maybe slightly older walking in his direction. She had short black hair that was just barely below her eyes, brown eyes with a beautiful face. The young lady was 5'10", with an hergless figure. All eyes were on her as she approached Gray's table. Behind her was a small entourage of 2 young men and 2 more young ladies. But none were as beautiful as she was. The group of 5 were all dressed extravagantly in trousers and long shirts. The young lady at the front was wearing a silver shirt with gold embroidery designs on it while on black pants. Gray guessed they were most likely from an influential family in Frost City. He waited patiently for them to walk past him, but to his surprise, the young lady stopped in front of his table. "If you don't mind, can I join you?" the young lady asked with a crisp and delicate voice. "Oh, sure," Gray replied after looking around before asking blandly, "And your friends?" "You don't have to worry about them, they'll get their own seats." The young lady waved off her group before sitting on the chair across Gray. The group of 4 headed to the table behind Gray's table, and to his surprise, the couple sitting there left the moment they saw them coming. "You must be new here," the young lady asked while signaling for the waiter to come over. Gray nodded before taking a sip of his wine. He hadn't sensed any form of malice from the young lady in front of him, so he decided to entertain her, since he was bored anyway. "Sorry to ask, but can I see your face?" the young lady asked with a curious expression. "No," Gray replied in a straightforward manner. The young lady gave Gray a strange look, not expecting he would be so straightforward with his reply. "I'm Sasha Rice, and you are?" The young lady extended her hand across the table for a handshake. Gray was taken aback when he heard her say her name. "She has the same last name as Alice. Maybe she could help me," he thought while stretching out his hand to shake hers. "Zeke Hoover," replied Gray. He didn't feel it was appropriate to tell this young lady his real name, since he wasn't 100% sure she was from the Rice family. "It's nice meeting you, Zeke," Sasha replied with a light smile. Gray nodded before focusing on his drink. Since he was still here, he decided to order a meal. While Gray was waiting for his meal, he found out from Sasha that this place was actually owned by the Rice family. They engaged in a casual conversation with Sasha being the one who spoke the most. After she was done with her meal, Gray asked her the question he wanted to ask the moment she walked up to him. "Why did you approach me?" He looked straight at the young lady. "Nothing. I'm just curious why you've been coming here for the past 4 days. Are you from the Smith family?" Sasha asked with a playful smile. "Smith family? I have no idea who they are," Gray replied calmly without showing any reaction. "Oh, that's nice then. But coming here every day seems a little bit suspicious, don't you think?" Sasha asked with the same expression. "I like the wine here," answered Gray. While Gray was speaking with the young lady the first time, he called Void over. Since she claimed she was from the Rice family, maybe Void might have seen her in the mansion. The appearance of Sasha has changed his plan. Instead of sneaking into the Rice family this night, he might as well have Void tail her. "Okay, have a nice day, Zeke," Sasha said before standing up. She signaled the others in her group before saying to Gray, "I've taken care of your meal and wine, so you don't need to worry about it." "Oh," Gray replied casually. His casual reply irked the young ladies as well as the young men from the group. They gave him a disgusted look before walking out of the inn. "Looks like I'll be keeping the money I was supposed to spend today," Gray thought with a chuckle. Chapter 308. Sasha Rice left the inn accompanied by her group as she headed for the Rice family compound. "Why didn't you just throw him out of the inn?" one of the young men asked, clearly irritated by Gray's behavior. The other 3 nodded in approval of his suggestion. The brief encounter they had with Gray made them have a bad impression of him, since he couldn't even appreciate Sasha's kindness. "Why would I throw him out? Did he do anything wrong in going to my inn?" Sasha asked nonchalantly. "He couldn't even say thank you. I think he's just a freeloader," one of the ladies replied with a cold snort. "I'm not too bothered about that. Ezekiel, get someone to follow him. I want to know where he's staying in Frost City, and if possible, everything you can find out about Zeke Hoover." Sasha turned to one of the young men before ordering, "Yes, my lady." With a bow, the young man called Ezekiel left the group, heading to the right side of the compound. Void had been relaying everything that had been happening with Sasha and her group to Gray. Since they left the inn, he even told him about everything they spoke about. Since Gray told him to report everything, Gray was still drinking what was left of his wine when he heard Void's report. He wasn't surprised by this, since he already knew Sasha would definitely get someone to follow him. The only thing he was thinking about was how he would be able to use Sasha to find out about Alice. Should I ask her directly? He asked himself. If Sasha was Alice's sister, which seems very likely right now, then she might know where she is. There's also the probability of her not having a good relationship with Alice, because Gray had never heard Alice speaking of any of her siblings before. He decided to see the outcome of Void following her. If she has any bad relationship with Alice, he might find out. His second option was to find someone who is working in the Rice family compound to ask. This was all on the presumption that Void was unable to find out anything from Sasha while he's following her. 30 minutes later, Gray stood up after finishing his drink, heading out of the inn. After he chatted with Sasha, he noticed most of the people who were at the inn at that time were all looking at him strangely, especially a group of 4. He didn't bother about them and walked out of the inn. As soon as he stepped out of the inn, 4 men stood up and walked out as well. When they got out, they looked in the direction Gray faced, before heading in the same direction. Of the 4 men, only one looked to be in his 20s, the others looked to be around mid and late 30s. The man in his mid-20s had a small scar that ran under his left eye. His brown eyes glowed with a murderous glint, and his huge figure scared most of the people who were in their way as they were walking. Gray was walking casually on the busy street, fully aware of the fact that these men were following him. In fact, they were not the only ones following him. 2 more people were following him in the shadows. The ones in the shadows should be the ones sent by Sasha. These guys, on the other hand, should probably be her enemies. He thought while walking. Of the 4 men, 2 of them were in the 8th stage of the origin plane, so Gray had no plans of finding out why they were following him. He could fight against one of them, but 2 was a little too much for him to handle. He saw a shop that was selling clothes. Looking at it interestingly from the outside, he walked inside. The shop wasn't too big, but it had a variety of clothes. There were over 12 rows in the shop. Each row was filled with different types of clothes. When Gray stepped in, a well-dressed young lady stepped forward to greet him with a friendly smile. "Hello, sir, I'm Petra. Is there anything in particular you're looking for?" Petra asked after a bow. Gray was a little taken aback by her question. He rarely went shopping, especially in these kinds of shops. Most of the time he went to buy clothes. He would just get one from the roadside or a small stall. "Do you have something for a banquet?" He quickly recovered before asking. "Yes, sir, right this way." Petra showed him one of the rows in the shops. Gray followed Petra to one of the rows. He looked at the clothes that she suggested, while telling him about the designs, as well as who made them. Most of them were made in Frost City, but some were brought from other cities. While Gray was in the shop, he noticed none of the people following him entered the shop, but they all kept their spiritual senses locked on him. Looks like they can't cause a scene here, Gray thought with a chuckle. From the appearance of those men, he felt they would come in if this place was ordinary. But seeing how they waited outside, he knew this place was owned by an influential figure in the city. Gray curiously asked Petra about the store and found out it was owned by a merchant organization. The discovery surprised him. He didn't think there would be a merchant organization that would be powerful enough to stop 2 8th stage origin plane elementalists. He was still thinking about the merchant organization when Void suddenly spoke to him. "What's up?" "She's heading into a room," Void reported. "And it's the same room Alice left her wooden object." "Oh, follow her, maybe she knows something." "I'm already in the room." Gray felt somewhat relieved when he heard this. Assuming that Alice and Sasha were to have a close relationship, then he wouldn't mind taking the risk of contacting her. After all, he had initially decided to take the risk of sneaking into the compound. Just as Gray was looking at a blue shirt and pants Petra was showing him, he almost stumbled when he heard the next thing Void said. "She's taking off her clothes. I think she wants to take a bath." She has taken off her clothes and is headed to the bathtub now. Shit, Void. Don't tell me that. Gray yelled at him angrily. But you said to report everything, Void replied, feeling wronged. Chapter 309. Is everything alright, sir? Petra asked when she saw Gray almost falling. Yes, I'll take this one and the black one you showed me earlier. Gray replied gently after calming himself. Void, never tell me something like that again, okay? He reprimanded. Yeah, but Klaus wouldn't mind me telling him, Void replied cheekily. You know what? Get out of the bathroom. What if she uses a secret entrance? Fine, stay. But mind what you tell me. Gray continued speaking with Void, while Petra packed up the 2 clothes he wanted. There were a lot of people in the shop, so he planned on changing into one of the clothes, and leaving the place with one of the people here, hopefully a group. He paid for the clothes before going into one of the changing rooms in the shop to put on one of his new clothes. 10 minutes later, Gray walked out of the changing room, dressed in the blue shirt and pants Petra was previously showing him. Petra, who was standing outside the dressing room, was left dumbstruck at the sight of Gray. She almost wanted to ask if Gray was the person who walked into the changing room just now, or if he was inside before. The cloak Gray previously wore covered at least half of his face, so she didn't know what he looked like. How do I look? Gray asked while spreading out his hands. It looks good on you, young sir. Petra was flustered by Gray's handsome face, that she was lost for words. Luckily, she managed to speak, although just be lie. Gray quickly caught the attention of some young ladies as well as young men in the shop. Even the older ladies stared at him in awe. After all, it's not every day they get the chance to see such a handsome young man. Gray, who was already used to being stared at by people, didn't really feel much from the gazes. He looked around, hoping to find a group he could tag along with when going out. While he was in the changing room, he made a small array on the clothes that was able to block out the spiritual senses of those watching him. He planned on activating it when one of the groups in the shop is about to leave. That way, it would be difficult for the people outside to find him. The people outside didn't know how he looked, so he didn't have any fears about walking out. Guess I'll take some traveling wares as well. Gray spoke calmly to Petra with his hands placed behind his back. Petra nodded before showing him in the direction of where the traveling wares were located. Due to being stunned by Gray's appearance, she forgot that he didn't come out with any of the bags he took into the changing room. Gray stayed in the shop for another 5 minutes, before noticing a group of 8 who were planning to leave. The group consisted of 5 young men and 3 young ladies, and they were all well dressed, not as extravagant as those who followed Sasha, but they would do. Without any further delay, he tapped his right pocket, and the essence stone that he kept there lit up for a second before going out. Array lines on the inside of his clothes lit up at the same time as the essence stones before going off. After successfully blocking out all prying senses, he regulated his stage with the help of the array as well, decreasing it to the first stage of the origin plane. If he took it lower than the origin plane, the group of 4 that were following him would find out, since his control over hiding it wasn't strong enough to hide it from them. But in the origin plane, he was certain that only those in the overlord plane would be able to notice he was hiding his stage. Gray approached the group of 8 with a friendly, even though his people skills aren't on the same level as Klaus. He didn't think he would have a problem with talking to the group. The group of 8 was surprised when they saw him approaching them. Just as they started heading out while talking, the man in his 20s from the group of 4 walked into the shop. He stared at the group suspiciously. After not recognizing any of them, he walked straight for where Gray was standing before he activated the array that hid him from them. Gray smirked inside while leaving the shop with the group. The group invited him to join them for a birthday ceremony they'll be attending in 2 days' time, and he agreed, since he wouldn't really be doing much with Void following Sasha now, and he could hopefully get to find out the relationship between Alice and Sasha from this group as well. After taking the invitation letter from the group, he left them and headed back to the tavern he was staying at. He made sure to wear his cloak before going into the tavern. Later that night, phew, Gray breathed out heavily with a white mist leaving his mouth. He opened his eyes to look at the full moon through the window. I'm finally in the 6th stage. To think I'll advance this quickly, he muttered to himself while staring out the window. After just 4 days of constant cultivating every night, he had finally broken through to the 6th stage of the origin plane. Now, He was starting to see the advantages of awakening more elements. Awakening the darkness element greatly boosted his cultivation speed. But what made him break through this quickly was obviously the great earth essence liquid he absorbed when improving the elemental grade of his darkness element. Gray brought out the disc and touched the middle. He looked at the positioning of everyone and noticed Reynolds and Klaus had moved a considerable distance from where they previously were. The only thing that made his face turn sour was Alice, whose light dot was still in the same position. Hopefully, I'll know where she's located soon. Chapter 310. Frost City, Serene Villa. Gray was currently standing outside the villa, dressed in a gold shirt and black pants. This was the place the group he spoke with at the shop told him to come for the ceremony. It was the birthday ceremony of an influential old man in Frost City. According to the group, the man was over 800 years old. The sun would be setting in a few minutes' time. Gray was told to come just after sunset, but he felt coming earlier wouldn't do him any bad. He waited quietly at a corner, trying to attract as little attention as he possibly could. There were others who were standing outside the villa gate as well. While he was waiting for the group to come, he watched as different people walked into the villa, both young and old. But most of them were around his age or in their mid-20s. Apparently, only those who had invitations could go in. Luckily, he didn't try to go in when he arrived, rather, he waited in a corner, observing the whole situation. He suddenly sensed Void coming close to his location. Raising his head, he saw Sasha Rice, along with the group of 4 who followed her to the inn 2 days back, walking towards the villa. Oh, looks like she was invited as well, he thought inside. Void following Sasha these past 2 days hadn't gone without rewards. They haven't been able to locate Alice yet, but Void had gotten the chance to see her father, and also find out that Alice wasn't in the Rice compound when the people sent by the Emperor got there. Gray started a conversation with Void, who didn't have any problems with sneaking into the villa along with Sasha, who had an invitation. 7 minutes later, Gray finally saw the group he was waiting for, heading towards the villa gates. The group consisted of 3 young ladies and 1 young man. The 3 ladies are sisters, 2 were born from the same parents, while the other was their cousin. He recalled the ladies were called Marie, Aldrida, and Elda. They were from the Earl family, while the young man accompanying them was Randall Lankin. After getting to the gate, the group stopped and started looking around, seemingly searching for Gray. I don't think he's here yet, Elda said while looking around. We should wait a little longer. I believe he'll come, Aldrida said, trying to make sure the group waited for Gray. Aldrida is the youngest amongst the group. She is the younger sister of Elda. Elda laughed cheekily while giving Aldrida a playful glance. You like him, don't you? Aldrida's cheeks turned red as she quickly looked at the ground, not wanting to make eye contact with any of them. The group was still teasing Aldrida when Gray walked up to them. Hello, he said out loud to gain their attention. He was already close to them when they were teasing Aldrida, so he overheard their conversation, but he didn't plan on letting her know she heard them, hence he acted as if he was just arriving. Aldrida's cheeks burned up when she heard Gray's voice, and she became even more embarrassed, which prompted more laughter from her group. Hello Zeke, we were just talking about you, Elda said while spying Aldrida from the side of her eyes. Oh really? What were you saying? Gray said, feigning ignorance. Aldrida quickly hurried to close Elda's mouth before she spilled everything. She knew her sister. She just might say everything to see how Gray would react to it. Why don't we go in? The occasion has already started, she said after stopping Elda from speaking. They showed the guards at the gate their invitation before the guards allowed the group inside. Gray shook his head as he headed into the villa. He didn't know how to get past this situation. This was the first time he was facing something like this. H being handsome is such a headache, he thought dejectedly. If other boys were to hear him, they would definitely beat him up. Reynolds wouldn't mind getting Klaus to rally the people who would beat him up. After going through the door, Gray was greeted by a sight of a wide and spacious courtyard. There was a stone bridge as well as a small man-made lake in the villa. The lake stretched across 500 meters. A pavilion was just after the bridge with people already seated there. Where's Sasha sitting? Gray asked Void as soon as he walked past the bridge. On the right part of the pavilion, the seats at the front, replied Void. When Gray got to the pavilion, he realized it was separated into 2 parts, one on the left and one on the right. There was a small space in the middle, and he could see some silhouettes dancing to the music being played. Gray was just about to suggest to the group that they should head to the right part of the pavilion. He noticed that someone came up to them, and after looking at their invitation, directed them to the left side of the pavilion, while also asking for his and Randall's name. The man introduced the Earl family, which consisted of the three ladies, Randall Lankin and Zeke Hoover. Gray almost facepalmed when the man called his name. Although he expected it when he asked for his name, he still didn't really want him to call out his name. He wasn't a fan of attracting attention. Not just that, but Sasha was here, and she knew this name since it was the name he told her. As soon as Sasha heard his name, she immediately looked in the direction of the group as they were walking towards their seat. After seeing the group, she instantly knew which of the two young men was Gray. This wasn't the first time she was attending an occasion with Randall, so he knew what he looked like. "Wow, he's handsome," she blurted out unconsciously. The two ladies who were sitting alongside her nodded with mouths wide open. They didn't know this was the same freeloader they saw 2 days back. Only Sasha knew his name. The group wasn't the only ones who stared at Gray in awe. Most of the young people there stared at him for extended periods. Even after he took his seat, some people still occasionally stole glances at him. Gray looked straight at Sasha before smiling slightly and giving a small nod as a form of greeting. They were seated 2 tables behind the first table on the left. Sasha responded with a nod of her own before looking away from him, staring at her front. The celebrant was about to arrive, so everyone focused their attention on the front of the pavilion, where a special seat was placed. Chapter 311. Everyone watched on as the silhouette of a man could be seen walking in the direction of the pavilion from the right. The figure walked softly and elegantly. His steady steps resonated across the quiet pavilion. Gray stared intently as the figure soon came into view. In front of him stood a man who looked to be in his 50s, broad-shouldered, and stood around 6'2". From his facial appearance, he looked only to be older than Klaus's father by a few years, or at most 10 years. The only thing that truly showed his old age was his gray hair and beard. Is he really over 800 years old? He couldn't help but ask himself. Be careful, he's an Overlord plane expert above the mid-stages. Void warned Gray as soon as the man walked in. Even though he knew the man didn't have anything against Gray, and would most likely not even speak to him, he felt he should at least warn him. "Oh, I didn't think he would be in the late stages," Gray said before reassuring Void. "Don't worry, I'm not here to cause trouble. If anyone needs to be careful, then it's you." HMPH. "I'm not that stupid to cause a problem here," Void snorted coldly. "Oh really? If I remember correctly, you stole the treasure of a dragon that I think is over 500 years old without even thinking. I think when you see anything shiny that catches your eye, your brain turns off." Gray replied with a sneer. There's no way he would believe Void would sit still if he sees something shiny. Luckily he was here. And besides, if he couldn't stop him, it's not his problem since they went together. "That's old man Gerald. He's the owner of this pavilion. He's not affiliated with any of the big families here. Rather, he's the regional leader of the Lenses organization. Even the head of the big families shows him maximum respect," Aldrida explained to Gray as the old man took his seat. "You said regional leader. Does that mean there are other regional leaders?" Gray asked, a little perplexed. "Yes, actually, the Lenses conglomerate has a long history. It's even older than the Killen Empire. According to the history books, they started when the continent was still united. Since they're a merchant organization, they don't get involved with the battles for power. They currently have branches in each of the empires." Elder chimed in on the conversation to tell Gray what she knew about the organization. Aldrida glared at her sister for stealing her opportunity to impress Gray with this information. Elder smiled before staring at Gray. She shook her head softly when she saw how his attention was currently on Gerald. "Wow, that old. They should have powerful figures since they can perfectly operate in each empire without being controlled by any." Gray exclaimed softly as he shifted his attention back to Gerald. Given the tension between the empires right now, Gray found it amazing that an organization could perfectly operate, moving things and personnel between them without being interrupted by either of the empires. Clink, clink, clink. "Welcome everyone, this old one is Gerald Lenz. I'm grateful to see so many of you coming here for my birthday celebration once again. It only felt like yesterday when I celebrated my 800th birthday. But now, it's already been 10 years. Gerald spoke slowly and coolly while appreciating his audience. He didn't say much after greeting his audience. He quickly started the birthday party off before taking a seat. Wow, 810, now that's old. Gray, what's the lifespan of humans in the Overlord plane? Void asked. Around 1000 to 1200 years, Gray replied after a while. The ceremony continued for about 2 hours. Entertainment was going on from the people who were playing the instruments. Some moments ago, a few ladies approached Gray asking him for a dance. Actually, they weren't the first. This caused him to draw attention from most of the young men in the big families, since even some of the ladies they liked were all looking at Gray with heated eyes. After one lady summoned the courage to ask him for a dance, it was almost like the others took it as a challenge upon themselves to make sure he danced with at least one of them. On the front table, this was the table Gerald Lenz was sitting at. 5 people were seated at this table, Gerald himself and 4 others. One young lady who looked to be in her late 20s, an older looking lady who had the same features as the young lady, and 2 old men. Who is that young man? Gerald couldn't help but ask. Seeing the attention Gray was drawing to himself amused him, hence he felt curious about him. His name's Zeke Hoover, he came with the Earl family. I think he's a friend of the youngsters. A young lady by his right replied. Hoover? I don't think I've heard of that family name before. Do you know of it? Gerald asked while rubbing his beard. No, I don't think he's from this city. The young lady shook her head. Well, he's going to have a hell of a time when that segment starts, the older lady said gently. It should be about time now, I think, the young lady said before giving Gray a pitiful glance. 10 more minutes went by, and a middle-aged man walked forward. He announced that it was time for presenting gifts to Gerald Lenz. Crap, I forgot about this. Gray's face twitched a little. This was the first time he was attending a birthday ceremony of this caliber. He had followed Klaus to one of the ones he forced him to at Luna City, but it was for a young man, and he didn't stay long. He immediately started going through his spatial ring, if he could find anything good to offer to Gerald as a birthday gift. After going through his storage ring, he decided against it. The only thing he had in abundance was elemental weapons, but those weren't something someone of Gerald's status would see any value in, since he could get them at any time. Other than that, he had some extremely valuable treasure, like the liquid extracted from the blooming viper, which had amazing healing capabilities, but bringing out any of such treasures would instantly put him in danger, since he wasn't from any of the big families here. Gray stayed in his seat while the Earl girls went over to offer their gifts. Even Randall brought a gift. After drawing so much attention previously, most people stared at him, waiting for him to stand up, but to their surprise, he didn't move an inch. Chapter 312. Hair. He's just a poser. He didn't even bring a gift for old man Gerald. A few of the young men started poking fun at Gray when they realized he didn't bring a gift. He wasn't the only one who didn't bring a gift, but after drawing so much attention, he was the one who stood out the most. Sasha looked at Gray, amused by his current situation. However, she was left disappointed when she realized he wasn't the least bit fazed by it. He was even eating what was left of his food, not bothering to look at the people speaking. A foodie, she thought to herself. This was the second time she was encountering Gray, and from what she has deduced, he was a lover of food. At the front table, he doesn't seem to be bothered by the hate he's currently getting. Gerald chuckled softly while looking at Gray, who was almost taking all the attention on his birthday. He wouldn't be so unconcerned soon, the older lady said. Gerald laughed but didn't say any further. He knew Gray had nothing to worry about. He's more curious how Gray planned on handling being public enemy number 1. The Earl sisters came back along with Randall after giving their gifts. Gray sensed someone approaching him. He raised his head to see an elegant young man walking towards him with a smirk. He shook his head before looking away. I didn't even do anything to them, yet they're all hating me, he complained internally. He noticed he had been getting hate glares from some of the young men at the ceremony. Without being told, he could tell the young man walking in his direction is one of his haters. What do you want? Gray asked while still looking in the Earl sisters' direction. The young man who stood behind Gray felt disrespected because Gray didn't even bother to look at him when speaking. He swallowed his anger before asking, "How useless can you be to come to a birthday party without even bringing a gift for the celebrant?" The young man raised his voice to ensure he got the attention of everyone. His plan was to disgrace Gray in the presence of everyone, as well as make him look bad in front of old man Gerald and the girls. "Is this your birthday party?" Gray asked, unperturbed by the unwanted attention the young man was bringing his way. And the young man almost choked on his answer, but he summoned the courage to answer, "No." "Then why are you here clamoring for gifts?" Gray asked while taking a sip of the wine on the table, still not giving the young man a glance. You're disgracing the Earl family with this attitude," the young man said, pointing at Gray. "Are you from the Earl family?" Gray asked with a sneer. The young man was currently at a loss for words hearing Gray's question. The answer to this question was also no. If he says no, then Gray would just say it was none of his business. All his plans were ruined by a simple question from Gray. Now everyone was looking at him as if he was a fool. It would have been okay if he was able to disgrace Gray, but having the outcome turned on him the moment he went there made things worse for him. "Go back to your seat, stop disgracing yourself," Gray continued when he saw that the young man couldn't speak any further. The young man looked around with a long face. How can you come here with the Earl family and disgrace them?" Gray stopped answering him entirely and focused on his wine, savoring the taste with eyes closed. "He's not from this city and knew nothing of the birthday celebration. We only invited him when we saw him a few days ago." Aldrida spoke up when she saw the young man planning on continuing his taunts, which Gray clearly wasn't bothered with. "How could you bring a stranger too? Are you really that desperate?" Gray interrupted the young man when he saw how far he was taking it. After asking the question, he glanced at the young man from the side of his eyes. The young man stood rooted when he saw Gray's stare. It was like he was looking at a grim reaper waving at him. He gulped before unconsciously retreating to steps. Gerald and everyone else was watching the scene attentively. They didn't miss the part where a single glance from Gray sent the young man retreating in fear. Gerald looked at Gray again before looking at the middle-aged man who was in charge of announcing the events in the ceremony. He nodded to give him the go-ahead to continue with the ceremony. The middle-aged man quickly stepped forward and coughed twice to draw the attention of the crowd. "It's gotten to that part of the ceremony once again. This time, we made sure to make a bigger platform to ensure everyone can use their full abilities." Gray gave the girls an inquisitive look. Aldrida quickly explained what the middle-aged man meant by that part of the ceremony. Apparently, old man Gerald enjoyed watching youngsters spar, so whenever he celebrates his birthday, he would always have this segment at the end of the celebration. The young man who was trying to disgrace Gray had long disappeared. While Aldrida was explaining to Gray, the crowd all stood up and moved to the western part of the villa. There was a space that spanned at least 400 square meters. A 200-meter platform was placed in the center. "A jade platform, damn," Gray exclaimed inside when he saw the platform. Jade might not be the hardest type of stone, but it was extremely difficult to destroy. Only an earth elementalist in the Overlord plane could easily make jade. Gray was already very close to being able to make jade. The crowd all took their seats around the platform before the middle-aged man climbed onto the platform. "I presume most of you know the rules, but since some of you are new, I'll go over it again." The rules of the battles were simple. Anyone who first stepped onto the platform could challenge anyone they wanted. During the battle, as soon as one party is unable to continue or admits defeat, the battle is stopped. Death was not allowed in the battle, and although there are mistakes, since it's a battle after all, if the judges find out that the act of killing the opponent was deliberate, then the other party would be punished according to the rules. "Interesting, this should be entertaining," Gray mumbled. He could already almost foresee the number of challenges he would get. It wasn't hard to guess given the number of people who were currently looking at him with fiery eyes. The young man who previously walked up to him was staring at him with killing intent. "If looks could kill, then you'd be dead by now," Void snickered at Gray's misfortune. "Being handsome is such a headache," Gray replied with a shrug. As soon as the middle-aged man announced for the battles to start, the young man who previously walked up to Gray was the first to get to the platform. Everyone naturally expected this, and most of the people wanted to see Gray's strength, hence they let this guy go first. "I challenge Zeke Hoover," the young man announced loudly. The crowd turned to Gray's location, only to see him staring at the young man with an amused smile. Not interested. Chapter 313. What? The young man exclaimed with eyes almost bulging out. I'm not interested. What's so hard about understanding that? Gray said with a wave of his hand. He rested his back on his seat before raising his leg and putting it on the empty seat by his side. After he got into a comfortable position, he started picking his nose. His nonchalant attitude about the challenge sent the young man hysteria. He almost pulled his hair out from frustration. Just when he thought he was about to have his revenge, Gray rejected the challenge without a second thought. You coward, he stuttered while pointing at Gray. Gray removed his finger from his nose. After looking at it, he flicked it repeatedly before looking at the young man on the platform. I'm not interested, go play with someone else, he repeated. The young man looked at Gray speechless. The crowd was just as surprised as he was, not expecting Gray to ignore the young man so blatantly. Sasha, the old sisters as well as Randall looked at him in shock. Of all the people here, they were the ones who could say they had come in contact with him, and he didn't show such an attitude. Gerald chuckled seeing how Gray was handling the issue. He's doing better than I thought. He's literally doing nothing. The young lady who was previously accompanying him at the pavilion said, well, what did you expect him to do? You see, I also feel his choice of not fighting is the correct one, Gerald stated calmly. Huh? Why do you say so? The young lady asked, a little confused. Do you think this will be the only battle he would fight if he agrees? Gerald asked. The young lady looked at the young man standing on the platform, then at the crowd. She could see there were a few who were eager to see the young man fight against Gray. If Gray were to accept this battle, it meant he was paving the way for the others to challenge him as well. He is such an interesting and calculative individual, only a few people his age can match that, Gerald praised. The group who were accompanying him all nodded in approval of his remark towards Gray. Gray, on the other hand, didn't think of anything when he rejected the young man's challenge. He just didn't want to go through the hassle of fighting him. Even if he didn't have any issues with the young man previously, he would have still rejected the challenge. You're not a man. How can a real man reject a challenge so easily? The young man continued taunting, but this time, he was met with deaf ears. Gray didn't even bother to spare him a glance anymore. Rather, he changed his attention to the Earl sisters, and started talking about something else. Elder felt a little awkward, but Aldrida immediately started speaking with him. 1 minute went by with Gray not responding to the young man who was standing on the platform. With nothing left to do, the young man left the platform with his head dropped low. For the second time in little over 5 minutes, Gray had disgraced him once again. The entire place fell into an awkward silence due to Gray not fighting. The next challenger stepped onto the platform a few seconds later after the young man left and challenged someone from one of the 3 big families. They were both in the 9th stage of the arcane plane. After they fought for almost 10 minutes, the young man from one of the big families won by a small margin. Their battle managed to quell the awkwardness that Gray's refusal to battle caused. The next battle started immediately right after, with 2 people in the early stages of the origin plane battling. Gray watched all the battles with little to no interest. He spoke with Aldrida almost during the entire time these battles were going on. 30 minutes later, I challenge Zeke Hoover, a young lady announced as she stepped on the platform. Gray, who was in the middle of speaking with Aldrida, totally forgot that was his name, so he continued speaking. I challenge Zeke Hoover, the young lady said again, this time heading in Gray's direction. Huh? Gray exclaimed slightly when he saw someone standing in front of him. He looked at the face of the young lady. She had flawless skin, fiery amber eyes, black hair that was tied in 2 ponytails. Looking at her, he felt she looked a little familiar. He just couldn't figure out where he saw her. Can I help you? He asked while looking around. He felt a little strange when he realized everyone was staring at him. Why are they staring? He asked internally. I challenge Zeke Hoover, the lady said while staring straight into his eyes. Gray thought after refusing the young man, no one else would challenge him, but to his surprise, he was challenged. The only thing he found good about it was that he wasn't challenged by a man. At least this showed the lady truly wanted to battle him, and not because of any grudges. As much as I'd like to accept your challenge, I'll have to decline. He refused her politely. Fine, I challenge Aldrida Earl. The young lady shifted her gaze to Aldrida. She was in the early stages of the origin plane, just like Aldrida, but she is 2 stages above her. Gray looked at her, before shifting his gaze to Aldrida. He had the intuition of not interfering, but he couldn't bring himself to allow Aldrida to fight against the young lady. The young lady was clearly targeting her because he refused to fight against her. Aldrida tried speaking, but was instantly cut short by the young lady. What? You want to refuse like this spineless guy right here? The young lady gestured while pointing at Gray, looking at him in disgust. Gray shook his head wryly. If he were alone, he wouldn't be bothered with being called spineless. But letting it affect Aldrida was something he couldn't stand. You know what? I accept your challenge, but I have to warn you. I don't spar with people I don't like, I fight, he said coldly. What's the difference? The young lady asked mockingly. It means one of us will most likely die. Gray slowly, with a cold smile on his face. He was naturally unafraid of anyone here, except for those in the Overlord plane. There were only 8 people in the 6th stage of the Origin plane, and 3 in the 7th stage. These were all people he was confident he would be able to defeat easily one-on-one. The young lady didn't back down when she heard. Instead, she pushed on. Just what I wanted. If I may ask, do you have anything against me? Gray asked. Given the level of everyone here, they didn't have any problems overhearing Gray and the young lady's conversation. Gray agreeing to fight came as a surprise to them, but they were taken aback when he said one of them would die. She's the sister of William, Aldrida said to Gray, who was about to head to the platform. William? Who's William? Gray asked with a questioning look. The guy who challenged you. Oh, no wonder I thought she looked so familiar. Gray nodded before adding, I'll be back. Chapter 314. Gray stood on the platform, staring at the young lady who was standing before him. The young lady's brother who previously challenged Gray suddenly stepped forward. You coward. You couldn't fight against me, but you agreed to fight against my sister who's weaker. Oh, I was just about to call you over. Beating her wouldn't satisfy my current D?r. Why don't you join her? Gray tilted his head to the side to look at the young man. HMPH. Do you think you can defeat me? William snorted before stepping into the platform. The middle-aged man who was in charge of the rules was about to step in, but Gerald stopped him. He wanted to see how Gray would be able to handle this issue. William was among the few people who were in the 7th stage of the origin plane, added to his sister who's in the 3rd stage. He didn't think Gray's chances of winning would be high. In fact, he believed Gray would most likely lose, miserably. William is from the Smith family, being someone who's only 25 years old, but already in the 7th stage of the origin plane. It showed how hard he trained. Well, he couldn't compare him with Gray, who didn't seem to be even 20 yet, but was already in the 6th stage of the origin plane. But he still felt Gray would lose if he fought against the siblings. So much for being calculative, he muttered quietly. On the platform, Gray was facing off against both siblings. Phew, this better be worth it, he thought internally. Fighting here is almost the same as revealing his identity. Since the Emperor's people were in Frost City, then they would obviously be here as well. While he was speaking with Aldrida previously, one of the topics they mostly spoke about was Gerald. His current plan is simple: find a way to get Gerald behind him. He didn't know how long he would be staying in Frost City, and the longer he stays, the more dangerous it becomes. But if he could have ties with someone as powerful as Gerald, then he wouldn't need to worry about anything else, and focus fully on finding Alice. Are you ready? He asked the duo standing before him. His confidence stunned the crowd as well as the duo in front of him. Other than those in the Overlord plane, the rest thought he was a 1st stage origin plane elementalist, so they didn't know where his confidence was coming from. I really want to see if you can continue talking in this manner in a few seconds' time. William snickered. To him, Gray was dead. He already planned to kill him after they left this villa, but since Gray had presented him the chance to put him through pain, then he didn't mind taking it. Gray smirked before taking a step forward. As soon as his foot touched the ground, his cultivation stage increased by 1. He took another step, and his cultivation stage increased by 1 again. After taking the 5th step, his stage had increased by 5, putting him in the 6th stage of the origin plane. What? Sasha, the Earl sisters, Randall, and every other individual in the origin plane exclaimed in shock. Only a few who had been informed beforehand about Gray's real cultivation stage didn't feel surprised. Is this where? William, who was about to speak, stopped midway, his pupils dilated as his hair stood on end. Without delay, he immediately retreated 3 steps back and stood on his sister's left-hand side, raising his left hand before him. A lightning wall appeared before him. Bam! Bang! The sound of something making contact rang out, followed by an explosion. Gray used the wind element to stabilize himself mid-air, before doing a flip and landing on his feet. A lightning elementalist, he's pretty fast. He muttered to himself. This was the first time his surprise attack failed, but he didn't dwell in it. William was able to control himself, so just like Gray, he landed on his feet. His sister, on the other hand, was a little less fortunate. She had a slower reaction speed. So before she could comprehend what was going on, she was sent flying by the force of the explosion. She landed on her back before bouncing a few times. Had the platform been only 50 meters long, then she might have bounced out of it. So fast. Everyone saw ?K?D in a cold breath of air. Just like William's sister, people with lower stages couldn't comprehend what just happened. All they saw was Gray taking a step, and the next thing was that he appeared some distance away, accompanied by a loud explosion. Other than that, they also saw William's sister crashing on the platform. Gerald squinted his eyes and started reaccessing Gray once again. From his single attack, he noticed him using 2 different elements. What caused the explosion was Gray covering his hand with his fire element when he saw the lightning wall blocking his path. Then he also used the wind element to stabilize himself, so he could land properly after being sent flying by the after effect of the explosion. William reacted quickly just like the first time, but this time his face was covered in horror. A large fire snake was currently making its way towards him very quickly, while multiple fire arrows shot towards his sister, who was still trying to stand up from the ground. Boom! Bam! The lightning wall William made in front of him couldn't block Gray's fire snake, so it exploded once again. The impact sent him flying. His sister, who was struck by the fire arrows, shot straight out of the platform, slamming into the empty seats by the side. William crashed into the ground, and just as his body bounced up, Gray appeared before him and delivered a kick to his midsection. That sent him flying in his sister's direction. Bang! William slammed onto the empty seats as well, just 2 meters away from his sister. 20 seconds, all it took was 20 seconds, and Gray completely dominated the siblings. One has to recall that although William's sister was weak, William himself was by no means weak. Not even those in the 7th stage could beat him this easily. He won the battle with the first strike. Unbelievable, Gerald said, shocked. This wasn't the outcome he predicted. No one expected this to happen. Gray literally just manhandled the siblings, and they couldn't even fight back. They weren't even able to defend, much less fighting back. What just happened? Aldrida asked with a stunned expression, but she was met with no reply. Her sisters, as well as Randall, were looking at Gray in a dumbfounded state. They were not the only ones not speaking. The entire place was deathly quiet that one could even hear a pin drop. Gray looked at the location where both siblings landed before shaking his head. Although he warned he would kill them, he didn't actually kill them. Anyone else? He asked while looking at the crowd. His question was met by the same deathly silence. Everyone was staring at him, but no one could say a word. Chapter 315. Gray stood at the platform for 15 more seconds, with no one else stepping up for his challenge. He decided it was time to leave, and allowed others to continue fighting. Before leaving, he glanced in Gerald's direction. Seeing the stunned expression on his face, he smiled before walking out of the platform. As soon as he left the platform, he suddenly sensed a strong aura launching in his direction. But he made no efforts to dodge or even look in the direction of the aura. HMPH. This is not the Smith family villa. Know your position. Gerald snorted coldly before exploding out with his own terrifying aura. The figure that was launching towards Gray stopped a few meters away from him, cowering in fear, knowing fully well that the Lens organization was not something their family could fight against. They stood 0 chances against them. The figure turned out to be a middle-aged woman who quickly apologized. "I'm sorry for my misconduct." When she was done apologizing, she looked at Gray. "Cherish the time you have left, boy. It's not going to last." Hair. Gray scoffed as a response before taking his seat. After taking his seat, you should hurry while they're still alive. It would be a shame if they died with you here. Gerald's intervention currently shows his plan was going accordingly. If things fall through, this section of the ceremony would end soon. HMPH. The woman snorted coldly before flying in the direction of William and his sister. On getting there, her pupils dilated, and she instantly turned to look at Gray, who had a devilish smile on his face. The current condition of the duo was not very good. Each of their elemental beads was cracked, and essence was slowly sipping through. Healing the crack on the beads is something that has been seen as almost impossible. With the crack on their elemental beads, their cultivation stage will slowly start receding, before finally taking them back to the arcane plane. In the history of the entire continent, there have been only 2 cases of people who have been able to mend their cracked elemental bead. According to what was written on the records, what they used to heal it was a rare natural treasure. Presently, this treasure hasn't been found in over 3,000 years. The duo found it by accident at that time, but as things stand, the Smith siblings have no way of mending it. You bastard. The woman couldn't contain her anger, and exploded out with a pressure she sent towards Gray's position. If I recall correctly, I remember saying I don't spar with people. Not killing them was the best I could do, Gray said casually. It was almost like the pressure the woman sent his way was nothing. This once again shocked all the Overlord Plane experts in the ceremony. Crap, I'm going all in. If this guy doesn't reach out to me, I'm doomed. He thought worriedly inside, but he still kept his calm and collected outward expressions. He couldn't afford to show any signs of fear in this state. Since they were previously in the origin plane, they might get lucky to get a bonus 50 years. But that's it. A normal human can live within 80 to 100 years. Those who are extremely healthy could live as much as 150. Well, this is for those few who fail to awaken their elements. As soon as one awakens their elements, their body becomes naturally healthier. This means even without cultivating, they can get to 150 years. The lifespan of a collection plane elementalist is 200 years. Once the elementalists break through to the fusion plane, it increases by 100 years more. Another breakthrough in plane bumps it to 400 years. But as soon as the elementalist gets to the origin plane, it increases by 300 years, raising it to 700 years in total. Getting to the Overlord plane almost doubles that figure, only going short by 200 years. Gray watched on as the lady took the siblings out of the villa. He couldn't say he regretted what he did. One of the reasons he was this ruthless was because he knew William would definitely attack him when he leaves this place. The second reason was that the Smith and Rice family weren't on good terms. He might not be part of the Rice family, but since Alice was there, that was enough. Just like Gray predicted, the ceremony came to an abrupt end, 30 minutes after the Smith family left. You shouldn't have done that, Elder said as the group walked towards the exit of the villa. Gray noticed there was a change in her tone. It wasn't as friendly as it used to be. He also noticed she stopped Aldrida from speaking to him on multiple occasions since he came back from the platform. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Also, I totally understand the change in your attitude, he said, not trying to explain himself. While the group was still walking, Sasha walked up to them. Zeke Hoover, the last time I saw you, you were munching away in my inn. Now, here you are, making an enemy of the Smith family. I think it should be the other way around. Gray replied with a chuckle. For someone who hid his appearance, you seem very confident, Sasha said while wearing a curious expression. For someone who sent people after me, you seem very carefree, Gray replied with a slight smile. Sasha was about to reply when the middle-aged man who was in charge of the ceremony approached them. Zeke Hoover, Master Gerald would like to see you, the middle-aged man said as soon as he got there. Guess this is where I bid you farewell. We shall meet again, Zeke Hoover. Sasha turned and walked back to her group before exiting the villa. You can leave, I'll be fine. I hope we meet again, Gray said to the Earl sisters before turning to the man. Aldrida wanted to speak, but Elder held her hand before shaking her head. With that, the Earl sisters left the villa. Shall we? Chapter 316. Gray was led by the middle-aged man into the main building in the villa. It had a very simple but exquisite decoration, but he didn't have time to appreciate it. His mind was currently filled with what to say to Gerald. He needed his help, but he knew this was no way Gerald was just going to help him. How can I convince him? He thought as the middle-aged man stopped in front of a golden double door. Knock, knock. The middle-aged man knocked twice before opening the door for Gray to head in. Gray exhaled before stepping through the door. On walking into the room, he was surprised to see 3 people there instead of 1. He recalled seeing the other 2 faces at the ceremony. They sat close to Gerald during the entire ceremony. It was both ladies who were with him at the ceremony. Gerald was seated on the chair behind the desk. The older lady was seated opposite him, while the younger one was seated on the couch in the office. Welcome, Zeke Hoover, or should I say Gray Dawson, Gerald said after Gray stepped into the room. Gray was taken aback, but he didn't show any change in his expression. You seem to be very well informed. For someone my age, I make sure to investigate the background of everyone who seeks my attention, Gerald said while pointing at the couch in the office. Gray took his seat while giving the young lady a quick glance. Since you know who I am, no need to beat around the bush. I need your help. With what? Gerald asked curiously. The Emperor is searching for me, and seeing how desperate he is, I don't think it will turn out to be anything good for me. If he were only searching for me, then I wouldn't be too bothered, but apparently, he's searching for my friends as well. I was able to get to one of my friends before his people got to him. Since you've done your research, then you should know why I'm here in Frost City, Gray explained. You're searching for the little lass from the Rice family, I presume, asked Gerald. Gray nodded with a serious expression. Why do you think I will help you? Gerald looked at Gray curiously, waiting for a reasonable reply. Well, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure you will. This is me taking a risk for my friend. It's either I take the risk of coming to you, or sneaking into the Rice family compound, Gray said. From my point of view, sneaking into the Rice family compound seems to be a better option than coming here. At least you could be protected by the fact that you're friends with the little lass. But here, you have nothing to hide behind. 2 reasons. Firstly, an opportunity to create ties with such a big organization. Secondly, mutual benefits, explained Gray. The young lady by the side looked at Gray with a questioning look. What can I benefit from you? He asked Gray. If my presumption is correct, the reason the Emperor is searching for me and my friends is because he sees us as a threat. I can't say I'm 100% sure, but I'm at least 40% sure. For someone the Emperor sees as a threat, I don't think I need to explain any further, do I? Gray asked calmly. While he was speaking with the Earl sisters, he found out from Aldrida that the reason the Lens organization was so powerful and feared was because of the ties they had with some terrifying individuals. The organization creates ties with people they see have the potential to be great, and in turn, gets them to be on their side. And if your presumption isn't correct, Gerald answered with a question of his own, it doesn't change anything. I don't need your help with going against the Emperor. I only need to find my friend and make sure she's alright. This is a deal where you have nothing to lose, and I'll owe you a favor. Well, that's on the premise we aren't friends, Gray replied with a smile. You do have the potential to be great, but do you think the Emperor will allow you to grow? From what I know, the Killen Empire isn't the only one searching for you, Gerald said. What? For the first time, there was a visible change in Gray's expression. All 4 empires are searching for you. Some of them have even come to us for information regarding you. So, why do you feel I wouldn't hand you over to them right now? Gerald asked while pressuring Gray with his full late-stage Overlord plane cultivation. Gray looked at him, lost for words. He didn't know what to say, because this had gone beyond his expectations. Why are the other empires searching for me? Could it be that they also found out about the Great Earth Essence liquid? He asked himself in shock. I assume you know why they're searching for you, Gerald asked Gray. Gray shook his head. He could guess it was because of the Great Earth Essence liquid, but he wanted to see if Gerald knew why. You found something that will make you a threat not just to the Killen Empire, but all 4 empires. But it seems only the Killen Empire is searching for your friends, the others are only looking for you, Gerald explained while taking a sip of the tea on his table. Gray sat still, looking at Gerald. This discovery was out of his expectations. Never would he have thought that the other empires would be searching for him. But how? Other than the Darkness Elementalist, no one else knew of me taking the Great Earth Essence liquid, he thought worriedly. He didn't think the group from the Blue Wind Empire who *sisted Quinn and his group knew the Great Earth Essence liquid was with him. The only time he said he had it was when he killed Quinn. Could someone have heard me? He muttered quietly to himself. You still haven't answered my question. Why do you feel I wouldn't hand you over to them right now? Gerald asked once again. Chapter 317. If you wanted to, I won't be sitting here. Gray replied. He felt fearful when he heard all 4 empires were looking for him, but he could tell Gerald didn't plan on handing him over. You're calmer than I expected, but you're not wrong. If I wanted to hand you over, then I'd have done that after finding out about you. Gerald chuckled, impressed by Gray's cool-headedness. Others would freak out if they found out that not 1, but 4 empires sees them as a threat. Is there a reason for that? Gray asked curiously. Gerald's decision of not handing him over showed him there was some hope in creating ties with him. He could also sense he didn't have any malicious intentions towards him. Do you really want to know? Gerald asked with a straight expression. Gray nodded. If I don't want to know, then why would I bother asking? He thought to himself but refrained from speaking it out. I'm scared. Gerald shook his head with a wry smile. Huh! Gray and the 2 ladies in the room looked at Gerald in surprise. This wasn't the answer you expected, right? Gerald asked before standing up from his chair, walking towards the window. Let me tell you a story. 55 years ago. He started speaking while looking out the window with both hands behind his back. On one of his journeys, he encountered a man at an old ruin. They clicked so they were together through most of the exploration. There were others there as well, and all of them were Overlord Plane elementalists, all 18 people there. The person with the lowest stage among them turned out to be the man. He was also the youngest. The man refused to hand the book over, since he nearly died in a trap while trying to obtain the book. A scuffle broke out between the man and the other 16 people. Gerald didn't fight against him, nor did he question-marxist him. Rather, he walked to the side. According to him, that was the best choice to make. But when the fight started, he got the greatest scare of his life. The man who was in the 4th stage of the Overlord Plane went toe-to-toe against 16 people. Each of these 16 people was at least a stage above, yet he went toe-to-toe with them. That was the first time Gerald saw a light elementalist. The man in his story was none other than Gray's teacher, Chris. Chris not only fought against them being in a lower stage, but he also defeated them, killing all of his opponents. Among the 16 people, there was one in the 8th stage of the Overlord Plane, but he didn't stand a chance against the rampaging Chris. Gerald watched in terror as Chris killed every single one of his opponents. When he was done fighting, he looked in his direction, and he stumbled in fright when he saw his eyes. Chris approached him, and he immediately started explaining his reason for not helping out. To his surprise, Chris didn't even bother with him, and went to sit by the side to recover. After that exploration, he managed to create ties with Chris. Since then, he had been the one giving Chris most of the information he needed, especially for his explorations. Now you see why I said I'm scared. If Chris were to find out I handed his precious student to the Emperor, I'd most likely be the first one he kills. I don't think even the organization can stop him from killing me, Gerald said after telling them the story. Dad, he might be strong, but I don't believe he can go against the organization. The young lady who was sitting on the couch with Gray stood up and said, You do not know him, child. I've seen him almost wipe out one of the oldest families in the Killen Empire because of a piece of roasted rabbit. Apparently, the heir of the family smacked the rabbit out of his hand into the water. Gerald shook in terror as he recalled the bloody scene. Damn, thank God teacher's temper is better now, Gray said to himself with his back soaking in sweat. When he recalled the day he stole Chris's roasted rabbit, he almost wiped out an entire family all because of a rabbit. The young lady asked, not wanting to believe what her father was saying. A very small piece. His temper is very unpredictable. The Emperor sent people after him, but he killed them as well. After killing a few high-ranked individuals in the Empire, the Emperor decided to let the matter slide after he apologized. Gerald stroked his beard as he said, Isn't that a bit too excessive? Also, how come I don't know of this? The young lady asked. Simple, the Emperor kept it under wraps. Of course, Chris was punished. He also had to compensate the rest of the family. Gerald shook his head in pity. The status the family enjoyed was reduced all due to the arrogant nature of a young lady. Chris's temper also had a role to play. but the family actually tried killing Chris after he killed the youth, hence his retaliation. Although Chris has a fiery temper, I've never seen him actually start a fight. All the killings he had done were all due to retaliation, Gerald explained to the trio in the office. Gray, who was hearing about his teacher's deeds, almost left his mouth wide open because of shock. This was the first time he was hearing about his teacher's past. Chris never told him anything about himself even after staying with him in the valley for most of the time. Chapter 318. Does this mean you'll help me? Gray asks hopefully. When he first came here, he came with the confidence that things would go according to his plan. It was only after meeting up with Gerald did he know things weren't as they seem. Looks like even till now I still need to depend on teacher. It's nice having such an amazing teacher, though, he thought to himself while awaiting Gerald's response. Yes and no, Gerald replied. Gray gave Gerald a questioning look when he heard his reply. The reply wasn't as straightforward as he wanted. Even though the Emperor doesn't want to offend us, it doesn't mean that I can actively go against him and his own empire. Doing that would incite rage among the other empires. All I can promise you is this. I can help you with information as well as protect you while you're in Frost City. But that's it, Gerald explained. That's already more than I expected. Thank you. Gray was elated when he heard this, and instantly showed his gratitude. At least with Gerald behind him, he could walk freely in Frost City. He didn't really plan on staying in Frost City anyway. As soon as he finds Alice, he would immediately leave this place. Now his focus is handing the devices to his friends. Once he's done with that, then he would focus on increasing his strength as he searches for his parents. When the thought of his parents came into his mind, he suddenly had an idea. With the vast resources the Lens organization has, they could help him with that. The fact that Gerald was able to quickly get information about him within the short space of half an hour showed this. Since he could do that, then he might be able to help him locate his parents, while he's still here in Frost City. Sir Gerald, I have 2 requests. Firstly, given your status, you should be able to send for the family head of the Rice family. According to what I've gathered, when the Emperor's people came, he told them Alice was not in Frost City. With his help, I should be able to find her quickly, Gray explained. Oh, I see you've been busy. Such devotion towards a friend is quite admirable. I'll send for him, he'll come first thing in the morning, Gerald replied casually. Seeing that Gerald agreed so easily surprised Gray. He thought he might brood over the matter, but he agreed so quickly. What's your second request? Gerald asked when he noticed Gray wasn't saying anything. I need your help with locating my parents, Gray said with a serious expression. I'm sorry kid, but that I can't help with. Remember when I said I did thorough research on anyone who wants to see me? That included your parents as well. You see, from what I've gathered, your parents only appeared in Red City some months before you were born. No one knows where they came from. It was like they appeared out of nowhere. Some years after your birth, your father disappeared. Your mother disappeared after you joined the Lunar Academy. There are no records of them anywhere else. The only reason I agreed to see someone like you who had a mysterious background is because Chris is your teacher. Gerald took his time to explain to Gray. Then where did they come from? He asked himself. He recalled he had a similar answer when he went to see Klaus's father the last time as well. Sorry if I'm asking too much, but can you tell me how you were able to gather so much within such a short time? The only you can get to know so much is if you communicated with someone in Red City as well as Lunar City. Given the distance, it's impossible unless... Gray's eyes widened when he thought of a possibility. A communication device. Gray and Gerald said at the same time. Oh, you've heard about them as well? Gerald asked curiously. This was something that was made not too long ago. They were able to acquire it due to their influence. The one they had was a better version when compared to the one the group from the Azure Empire used when Gray and his friends visited Xivia City. No, actually, I've been planning to make something like this. I just haven't been able to figure out the necessary arrays. Gray shook his head as he explained. Chris truly is your teacher. The fact that you can think of this is quite fascinating. Here, you can take a look. Gerald fished out a plaque-like item before throwing it Gray's way. Gray caught the item before curiously inspecting it. What happened next came as a surprise to Gerald and the 2 ladies. The previous impression the young lady had of him died totally when she saw him in this state. It was like she was looking at an obsessed student who wouldn't stop learning until he found out the reason for something. Another 10 minutes almost passed before Gray managed to come back to himself. He looked around, confused by the stares he was receiving from the trio. It was only after a few seconds did he recall what happened. "I'm sorry. It's just I've been bothered with making this for a while now, so seeing this intrigued me," he explained as he scratched the back of his head awkwardly. "It's okay. You'll stay in the villa until you leave the city," Gerald replied with a smile. "Thank you." Gray bowed to Gerald to show his gratitude once again. This was more than he hoped for, so he was pretty happy. "Take him to the room on the right wing," Gerald said to the young lady before turning to Gray again. "You can study the item for the night." He could tell Gray wanted to ask him this. Gray was all smiles as he left the room. The only thing he didn't get from this visit was the location of his parents. Other than that, he pretty much gained a lot from this. Chapter 319. What do you have that is making 4 empires search for you? The young lady asked as she was taking Gray to the room he was going to stay in. "I have no idea," Gray replied with a shrug. "Stop playing dumb. I could tell from your expression that you knew why," the young lady said a little aggressively. "I'm asking for your father's help, not yours. Since your father didn't ask, I see no reason why you're asking," Gray replied coldly. "HMPH, don't think I'm scared of your teacher. I don't believe my father's scared as well. He's only helping because they are friends," the young lady said. Gray threw a glance at the young lady and decided against speaking any further. "Heh, friends, my fault," he thought inside. He was smarter than that, so he obviously knew there was a catch to Gerald helping him. From the story Gerald told them, he could already figure out he was someone that wouldn't do something that won't benefit him. Hence he didn't help his teacher when the group wanted to fight against him. Gray knew the only reason Gerald became friends with his teacher was because of his insane strength. For someone who could kill people who are 4 stages ahead of him while also fighting against others, it was unimaginable what he could do when he reached the peak of this world. "If not for the fact that I really needed his help, I'd be out of here by now," thought Gray. "Void, come back. Can you spy on that guy in the late stages of the Overlord plane?" he asked. Void, who was on his way back to the Rice family compound, instantly halted. "What about Alice?" he asked. "I already have a way to get to her." Apparently, old man Gerald decided to help. "The thing is, I can't really say I trust him," Gray explained before telling him the story Gerald told them. "It will be a little strenuous, but I can," replied Void. "Okay. Good. Remember how I said you were not allowed to steal the Emperor's crown previously?" Gray asked. "Yeah," Void nodded. "I take it back. Once I comprehend the space element, we'll sneak into the castle," said Gray. "Haha, great. I've always wanted that," Void exclaimed happily. Gray had a smirk on his face as he followed behind the young lady. "Since the Emperor wants to kill me, then I don't mind playing with them and going into hiding. Well, that's all on the premise that I comprehend the space element and break through to the Overlord plane," he thought. Although he currently hates the Emperor and his family, he wasn't stupid to just charge towards them while he's still in the origin plane. Doing that was no different from a death wish. But after comprehending the space element and breaking through to the Overlord plane, he was confident in being able to escape. Gray wasn't bothered with her and immediately inspected the room before going in. He had to make sure there were no trapping arrays in it that might trap him after he stepped in. He only walked in after 5 minutes. While he was inspecting the room, he noticed the young lady didn't actually leave, but was standing by the side. Before he walked in, he turned to her before waving and walking inside. He shut the door the moment he walked in and immediately started studying the communication device. There wasn't much time to study it, so he had to understand it tonight. Outside the room, after Gray walked into the room, the young lady who was hiding by the side walked out with a cold expression. "HMPH, I don't see why Dad decided to entertain such an arrogant person," she snorted coldly before walking away. She headed back to the office they were previously in to tell Gerald of how Gray didn't trust them, and inspected the room before going in. "Well, the truth is, neither does his teacher," Gerald shrugged. "Then why are you helping them?" the young lady asked in confusion. The thing is this, we both have things to benefit from each other. Like Gray said the first time, mutual benefit. I don't need his trust. I only need his help when I want it. Gerald explained. Understand this, child. The reason we are so powerful is not that we have the trust of people, but favors. Of course, most of them trust us. But the really powerful ones know we're only using each other. As long as what I ask them to do doesn't go against what they want, they will help. He continued. I understand, Father. The young lady replied with a lowered head. Also, I'm really scared of his teacher. If the Emperor demands me to do something, I can chase him away. But Chris, that's another story. He is not someone I'd like to offend. The last time I saw him, he was already close to breaking through to the Sage Plane. For someone who can beat people while in the mid-stages of the Overlord Plane, it's unimaginable what he could do after breaking through to the Sage Plane. He'll be unstoppable, Gerald said, a little fearful. He couldn't deny the fact that he was dead scared of Chris. Void had already made it back to the room before Gerald and his daughter started talking, so he heard everything. Wow, Gray's teacher is a big shot, he exclaimed. He didn't disturb Gray, since he knew he was currently in his engrossed state, so speaking to him now would be a grave mistake. Void stayed with them for the rest of the night, while Gray focused on trying to understand the array on the communication device. Gray's room. Pieces of papers could be seen across the table that was in the room. Different array lines were drawn in all of them. Gray could be seen drawing some lines on a piece of paper in front of him. There, luckily, I managed to draw them all out. Chapter 320. Knock, knock. Gray heard a knock on his door, and quickly kept the papers in his storage ring. After keeping them, he walked towards the door and opened it. Well, you're early, he said with a smile. The Rice family head is here, the young lady said blandly before turning around. How annoying, Gray muttered under his breath. What? The young lady turned around and asked. Lead the way, Gray said before walking out of the room. The young lady snorted coldly before turning around. Void, how did things go? Gray inquired as he walked behind the young lady. Better than you think, replied Void. Oh really? Tell me about it, Gray said. Looks like his fear for teacher is genuine. At least that should guarantee my safety. Where's he now? Gray asked. In an office, accompanied by Alice's father, answered Void. How efficient he was able to call him over this quickly, Gray thought to himself. A few minutes later, they got to the office after going through multiple hallways in the villa. Creak. The young lady opened the door to the office but didn't go in. Gray entered the office and closed the door after entering, almost slamming it on the face of the young lady. After entering, he looked around the office. Gerald was sitting on his chair as usual, and a middle-aged man could be seen sitting opposite him. Both Gerald and the middle-aged man looked in his direction when they heard the door opening. You must be Gray, Alice's father asked as Gray walked in. He had a serious expression with a deep voice that sounded just like his expression, serious. His blue eyes were the only thing Gray found he had in common with Alice. Yes, Gray nodded before walking closer. He could see Alice's father was scrutinizing him as he stepped into the office. Old man, Gerald said you wanted to see me because of Alice, Alice's father asked. Yes, sir, I believe your daughter might be in danger, so I came to check on her to see if she's all right, Gray explained. Alice is not in the city. She left for a journey some weeks ago, Alice's father said gently. Sir, can you please tell me where she went? I know I shouldn't ask, but I need to make sure she's okay, Gray said. Alice's father raised a brow when Gray asked this. His expression told Gray he was getting visibly angry with his question. Donald, cut him some slack. He came all the way to Frost City, even though he knew the Emperor was searching for him. Don't you think you should at least show him a bit of trust? Gerald interrupted when he noticed the situation was going differently. No, from what I found out, he's the one who acquired the treasure. Why is the Emperor searching for my daughter then? Donald replied. I don't know, but if my guess is correct, the Emperor must have guessed I shared it with my friends. I only have 3 friends, and your daughter is one of them. Gray answered his question before Gerald could reply. HMPH. What's this treasure that would make even the Emperor make a move? Donald snorted. That's something I can't say. Gray shook his head. Then why should I trust you with my daughter's location? The thing is, I believe the Emperor would leave my daughter alone if I hand you over to him, Donald said while staring at Gray coldly. Gray's expression changed when he heard this. He never expected Alice's father would be this difficult to get to. I'm not the enemy here, the Emperor is. Do you think the Emperor would let Alice go even if he gets me? He sees us as threats to his supreme reign. Gray replied with a stubborn expression. Gerald shook his head when he saw this. He already knew of Donald's stubbornness, especially when it has anything to do with Alice. From Donald's point of view, telling Gray Alice's location would endanger her, since they were also searching for her. That means if the Emperor were to capture Gray, then he could get Alice's location from him. I'm not going to tell you where she is. You should give up and leave Frost City while you still can, Donald said calmly. I'm not leaving this city until I find Alice. I don't care if you're her father or not, Gray said, looking straight at Donald. There wasn't a bit of an atom of fear in his eyes, only stubbornness and determination. He had made his stance clear. It's either you tell me where Alice is, or I find out myself. Gerald looked at both parties before shaking his head. Donald, stop playing with the boy's emotions. You can already see all he wants to do is to make sure his friend's safe. Please, can we have some privacy? I want to ask him some questions. Donald looked at Gerald. Fine, but make it quick. This is my office, after all. Gerald stood up and left the office. After Gerald left, Donald focused his attention on Gray. What's the name of the treasure? He asked again. Gray looked at him but refrained from answering. If you want to know where Alice is, then I advise you to tell me. I've asked her this question as well, but she refused. Donald continued. 2 minutes later, Donald and Gray could be seen walking out of Gerald's office. After going through the pros and cons, Gray decided to tell him the treasure. He didn't tell him the number they acquired, and to his surprise, Donald didn't ask. Donald had a look of incredulity on his face as he walked out, and Gerald guessed it must have something to do with the treasure. He'll be following me to my family compound, Donald said as they walked past Gerald. Gerald nodded without any reply. Thank you for your help. Gray bowed to him when he walked close to him. It's nothing. Gerald waved it off. He watched on as Gray left the villa with Donald. This is the end of this video. Thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed and wish you wonderful rest of the day. The Silent Ruptors out.